Okay. Commissioners, please mute. I now call to order the Planning Commission meeting of January 27th, 2021. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing. Secretary Chirikuru, could you please read the statement of values?
Thank you, Chair. As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with courage, strength, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you. You can be seated. Elizabeth, please call the roll.
Commissioner Casey,
Present.
Chair Salame,
Here.
Commissioner Biagini,
Here.
Commissioner Chirikuru,
Here.
Commissioner Hero, Commissioner Wang.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to excuse Commissioner Hero for the evening?
I move.
Second.
Okay.
The
I
motion,
move.
Commissioner
By
Chirikuru.
Chirikuru. Yeah.
And who seconded the motion?
Biagini.
Biagini.
Thank you.
We'll wait for the votes.
The motion is to approve an excused absence for Commissioner Hero. Commissioner Casey,
Yes.
Chair Salame,
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini,
Yes.
Commissioner Chirikuru,
Yes.
Commissioner Wang.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We move on to, well, before we do the declaration of commission procedures, I'd like an opportunity to recognize our new commissioner, Commissioner Huang, and have him maybe say a word or two about his joining.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Lance. I'm so happy to join the team. Yeah, I try my best, and I need to learn a lot from you guys. Yeah, I appreciate all your help and guidance. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome.
All right, for the declaration of commission procedures, Secretary Chirikuru, could you please read that section?
Thank you, Chair. Public hearings are conducted by the Chair in accordance with the following procedures. The Chair of the Commission directs all activity during the hearings. All comments shall be addressed to the Commission. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent hearing. Applicants will be allotted up to 10 minutes to present and justify proposals following staff presentation of the item. Other speakers will be given up to 2 minutes. The applicant is allotted up to 5 minutes for rebuttal of comments. No additional comments will be accepted upon the close of public hearing, although the Commission reserves the right to direct questions to any speaker on any matter. Special procedures, time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the Chair. Appeal of Commission actions must be filed in writing within 7 calendar days. Close of
Okay.
procedures.
Thank you. I'll have to read in another little tidbit. Copies of the current agenda and staff reports for each of the items on the agenda are available from the Planning Division office on the Friday afternoon preceding the meeting and available online. For continuances and exceptions, this part of the meeting allows for applicants, members of the public, or other interested parties to request an item be continued without hearing or to withdrawn or three taken out of order. Are there any requests from applicants, the public, or the commission for a continuance or exception or any of the items on tonight's agenda?
Mr. Chair, may I give my 5/7 spiel?
Okay.
Charter Section 1003 provides that the vote of an entire membership of the body is necessary to take any action, which for a 7-member body means 4 votes are necessary in all circumstances. There are only 10 commissioners present tonight.
I have to.
A vote of 4 of the 5 is necessary in order to take any action. For this reason, we give applicants the opportunity to request a continuance in the event that fewer than 6 members are present. So this would be the time for any person who wishes to wait until 6 or 7 commissioners are present to request that continuance.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised or comments made. I guess we'll move on. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Secretary Chair Curry, could you please read the procedure?
Thank you. The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted, approved, or adopted by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. If any member of the Planning Commission, staff, the applicant, or a member of the public wishes to comment on a consent calendar item or would like the item to be heard on the regular agenda, please make this request now. Items listed on the consent calendar with associated file numbers constitute public hearing items. Item 1A, Planning Commission meeting minutes of October 14, 2020. Item 1B, Planning Commission meeting minutes of December 9, 2020. Item 1C, action on a use permit for a new unmanned telecommunication facility with a 70-foot tall monopine at 0 Richard Avenue. Commissioner Chair, I would actually like to request item 1C be removed from consent. I do have a question of staff and the staff wants to answer it now.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve 1A and B?
Motion to
So
approve
moved.
A and B.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Biagini, seconded by Commissioner Kizzy. Commissioner Kizzy, you have a question?
Oh, well, actually, I have a question on 1C, so maybe I can.
Well, we
lower
can wait
my-
for that.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll wait for the vote on 1A and B.
Okay, the motion is to approve items 1A and 1B. Commissioner Ikezi,
Aye.
Chair Salam,
Aye.
Commissioner Biagini,
Aye.
Commissioner Charakuru,
Aye.
Commissioner Wing. You
Oh,
will
he
need
has to abstain from, yeah.
Yes, okay, abstain. Thank you.
All right, the motion passes. We can move on and talk about item 1C. I see Commissioner Kizzy with her hand up.
Oh, well,
and-
but Commissioner Cherukuru had the question first, so I don't want to.
Yeah, I see both.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cherukuru then can move forward first.
I'll keep this to one question. Question to staff. Is there a replacement ratio for trees proposed for removal? In any of our, do we have a tree replacement ordinance, policy, or guideline?
Yes, we do in our general plan. So there's a specification that mentions that there will be a 2 to 1 replacement ratio. and that it can be upsized in the event that the nature and species and quality of tree warrants a larger replacement, but the minimum is 2 for every 1 removed.
Thank you, Gloria. That's helpful because I
Mhm.
would like for that condition. I know they're removing 3 trees, but I didn't see a replacement ratio. They do acknowledge it in the plan, the landscaping plan,
Mhm.
but I couldn't capture the actual ratio there. All I see in the condition is a planning fee for proposed tree removal, and tree replacement plan needs to be collected if project is approved, but it doesn't
Mhm.
talk about the actual replacement ratio. So if it works for the commission, I would like to see a condition added on the replacement ratio because these are sizable trees.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chirikuru. Rebecca Bustos is here stepping in for the project manager, Tiffany Vien, and I'm not sure whether we have that basically spelled out a little bit in more detail or in the condition or in the study for this monopole. But if not, typically it would be done at the ratio that we have in our general plan, and there would be also an assessment in consultation with our city arborist. But the one thing I will mention is that sometimes the telecommunications facilities cannot have trees interfering with the equipment. So it may be necessary to locate the trees off-site, like in a planter strip, something of that nature. But we do have off-site mitigation. So if Rebecca can step in and perhaps maybe clarify any of this for me on behalf of Tiffany. Rebecca, are
Yes,
you
yes.
okay, thank you.
Hi, Rebecca Bustos, Senior Planner. As Gloria said, I'm covering this item for Tiffany Vian. So, as Gloria said, because this is a telecommunications facility, they're unable to accommodate all of the tree replacements on site. For that reason, they are requesting that they be accommodated and be able to provide offsite planting, which we collect via an in lieu fee. I did see the condition you're specifically referring to, and I think it does make sense to add to that. I believe it's C5. Currently, it reads planning fee for proposed tree removal and tree replacement plan needs to be collected if the project is approved, but just to specify at what ratio.
Yes, thank you so much. That helps, Rebecca. So I'll yield with that addition to the condition when we approve this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Casey?
Thank you, Chair. I noticed in the proposal that there's like a generator. I'm assuming that that's for in case the power goes down, there's an outage.
Yes.
Now we have better battery technology available. I'm not sure how much the power the tower draws, but is battery a viable alternative to generator now? Because I understand generators, they have emit a lot of pollutant.
Yeah, I understand that. And thank you, Commissioner Casey. I just want to clarify. Earlier this year, I gave a briefing to the planning staff that there was actually state legislation passed, and I apologize, I don't have the Assembly bill or Senate bill. I will get it for you. I could forward this to you. But it essentially made a ministerial action to allow generators at telecommunications facilities, and the cities had to enact these with very little um, oversight because of the demand and need in emergency situations for telecommunications um, facilities. So we have to allow the generators if they ask for them. There are parameters for it, but as long as it meets that state legislation, we cannot ask them to substitute another type of uh, backup material. So that's probably why they're exercising that option.
Oh, thank you. I guess we're Trump then.
Mm-hmm.
I yield. Bye.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to mention too, since my hand's up, the generator backup is it's part of the emergency services requirement, and it's not just communication towers. There's other services that need that level of guaranteed power. So we'll see this on anything else that comes along where it's a part of an emergency response or emergency services.
Sure, and I can certainly forward that summary to all of you, and so you'll have that information.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments? Does this need to go to the public?
Yes, it is a public hearing item, so we have to
Right.
ask if, since it was pulled off consent, if there's any public comment.
All right. Yeah. Or do we have any public comment at this point on this issue? Don't see any hands.
No, we don't have any public comments.
Okay. So I have another comment from Commissioner Chiricuro.
I was just going to say it's a comment only that hopefully the monopole does look a little more natural than some of those really sore looking monopines. I mean, you could have as well just left it as a telecommunication pole because they look so artificial. If the whole intent is to make it look more natural, those monopoles do not. So I'm just hoping with better, technology on it to look more like a real tree. That was my comment, to make it look more closely at how it appears. And then I'm ready to make a motion to approve project with the additional condition specifying the replacement ratio for trees to be removed either on-site, replacement to be on-site or off-site, or in lieu fees. Thanks.
Okay. Do we have to go through the motions of closing public hearing when there was no public comment?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
No, not me. I need someone to move.
Oh, so moved. Sorry.
That's all right.
Second. Priya.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Biagini.
Be a
Sorry.
genie.
Thank you.
She's our motion machine tonight.
The motion is to close the public hearing. Commissioner Akezi,
Aye.
Chair Salim,
Aye.
Commissioner Biagini,
Aye.
Commissioner Chiricuru,
Yes.
Commissioner Wang.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. That's the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now I'm entertaining a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the application with the additional condition to require replacement ratios for trees removed, either on-site or off-site or through in lieu fees.
And Commissioner Chiricuru, can we specify that those replacement ratios would be consistent with the general plan policies?
Thank you. So added replacement ratios consistent with general plan policies. Sorry, Elizabeth.
Oh, not a problem.
I'll second that motion. Biagini.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve.
Was that Commissioner Biagini who seconded?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the motion is to approve item 1C with a change to condition C5, specifying replacement ratio for trees consistent with the general plan policies, removed to on-site or off-site or in lieu fees. Commissioner Akezi,
Aye.
Chair Salim,
Aye.
Commissioner Biagini,
Aye.
Commissioner Chiricuru,
Aye.
Commissioner Wang.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That'll actually boost telecom in the area pretty consistently and dramatically. So we're moving on to public presentations. Elizabeth, are there any members of the public that would like to briefly address the commission on any item not in the agenda?
Yes, Chair, you do have one hand raised in
Yes.
the attendees.
I see that's is Councilman Jane.
Okay. Well, first off, it's great to hear your voices. I would like to congratulate our new commissioner, Wang, on his appointment and to thank him for volunteering his time for the betterment of our city. I've known Chien for a few years now, and I'm very confident he will be diligent and will do a great job. I'm also looking forward to hearing Xander's annual excellent housing presentation on new housing laws. And I'm going to try my best to stump the attorney.
Okay. Thank you, Says.
Thank
Is
you,
there
Seth.
any other speakers?
No, there.
Thinking I would escape this year. Should have known better.
No.
Poor Xander.
No other speakers.
Okay. Thank you. And since that was a comment, I don't know. I'm going to keep looking to Xander. One of these days, I'm going to learn how many things have to be officially closed. Is there any public presentation closure process that we need to follow?
No.
Okay, good. Then we can move on to our public hearing items. And we have two items today, item number 2 and item number 3. Item number 2 is a public hearing action on the appeal for the development review, hearing adoption of the mitigated negative declaration of the architectural approval of the data center project located at 1111 Comstock Street. And then the second item will be the study session on the housing legislation update. Staff can then proceed with item 2 when they are prepared.
Thank you. And our project manager, Rebecca Bustos, our senior planner, is going to give this presentation. So as soon as she's ready, she'll begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you stated, this is an appeal of a new proposed data center located at 1111 Comstock Street. So specifically, this is an appeal of the development review hearing adoption of a mitigated negative declaration, as well as the architectural review approval for the development of a 121,170 square foot 4-story data center building. The project was approved at DRH on November 4th, 2020, and the appeal was filed on November 12th by Adams Broadwell, Joseph and Cardozo law firm. The project site is approximately 1.38 acres and is located on the north side of Comstock Street. The general plan is low intensity office R&D and the zoning is light industrial. Currently, the site is occupied by a 1-story industrial building. Here is some of the project data. So the current industrial building is approximately 24,000 square feet. The proposal is for approximately 120,000 square foot data center. It would be 4 stories with a max height at the roof of 80 feet and then a roof screening of the equipment up to 98 feet. They are proposing 24 parking spaces, which is consistent with our zoning ordinance, and are providing on-site bicycle parking. Here is a view of the site plan. Essentially, it is abutting Comstock with a driveway all the way around, which is required for emergency vehicle access. They are proposing 6 diesel-fueled generators and 1 500 kilowatt diesel-fueled engine generator, which would all be located in a generator room on the first floor of the building. In this instance, they are not proposing any outside equipment yard. Here are some views of the building. We were recommending approval of the architecture at the DRH meeting because they integrated some components that made it appear as an office building and kind of created activity here at the ground floor with the glass, as well as the overhang. Here's kind of a 2D look at it. So the materials consist of glass. They have that entrance canopy, as I mentioned, as well as some metal components. For the CEQA clearance, a mitigated negative declaration was prepared, and that was publicly circulated between September 21st of 2020 and October 12th of 2020. Mitigation measures in the areas of biological resources, cultural resources, and noise were identified in the MND and are included in the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. During the public circulation of the document, one public comment letter was received from Adams, Broadwell, Joseph, and Cardozo. So that comment letter had claims in it, essentially, that the MND failed to disclose, analyze, and mitigate potential impacts to air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and public health. And then it also claimed that the city did not provide all of the documents referenced in the MID for the entire comment period, and that the document's project description was incomplete. It also stated that an EIR should be prepared for the project. In response to these public comments, city staff, along with the CEQA consultant, David J. Powers, did prepare a written response to comments and essentially summarize that the air quality emissions from backup generators were determined to be less than significant based on regulations of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, BACMD. Greenhouse gas emissions were determined to be less than significant based on the fact that the project would result in 43.5% lower emissions than the statewide average for an equivalent facility due to Silicon Valley Power's mix and given the project's energy efficiency measures. Potential health impacts were also addressed. They were modeled and determined to be less than significant using the 2015 Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment Risk Assessment Guidelines and the California Air Resources Board guidance. In addition, the MND and all of the associated appendices were available on the city's website for the duration of the comment period. The hearing, the development review hearing, as I said, was held on November 4th, 2020. We did have one public speaker, again representing Adams, Broadwell, Joseph, and Cardozo, and they reiterated a majority of the comments that were previously submitted regarding the MND. And then, as I said, they also requested preparation of environmental impact report. Following the public comment, the hearing officer reviewed and deliberated and then adopted the architectural review as well as the MND and MMRP for the project, subject to conditions of approval that were established by the city's project clearance committee. Following the hearing, an appeal was filed. It was largely the same comments that were previously addressed related to the ISMND. For the architectural review, well, in relation to the ISMND, it was the same comments related to air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. And then in relation to the architectural review, the appeal alleged that the project would not meet one of the required findings that are found in our zoning ordinance, being that it would materially affect adversely the health, comfort, or general welfare. As I said, the MND's analysis did include a health risk assessment that determined health impacts of the project would be less than significant. In addition to that, the staff found that the approval of the architectural application would implement the purpose and intent of the general plan, and it also conforms to the zoning ordinance. It's a permitted use in the low intensity office R&D general plan land use designation, as well as the light industrial zoning designation. Site improvements would enhance the streetscape and increase property values. So therefore, we did find that that finding could be met. Before I get to the recommendation, I do want to point out we did receive an additional letter this afternoon that was forwarded to the commission. Again, it was largely the same claims that were presented in previous letters and that were responded to in the response to comments to the MND. One additional comment was they were taking issue with the fee associated with filing an appeal. However, that is a standard fee for non-residents, and that is payable by any appellant within the city. So based on that, our recommendation, staff's recommendation, is to adopt a resolution to deny the appeal and uphold the development review hearing adoption of the MND as well as the MMRP, as well as to adopt a resolution to deny the appeal and uphold the development review hearing approval of the data center project at 1111 Comstock Street, subject to the conditions identified by the city's project clearance committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for hands and comments and questions. Commissioner Chirkuru is first, followed by Commissioner Biagini.
Thank you, staff. So I'm, briefly pursuing through the actual EIR or MND document, I'm sorry. So there is an actual landscaping element, and there are 24 trees proposed for removal. And they're replacing 5. Am I getting this correct?
I'll need to confirm with the landscape plan, but yes, off the top of my head, that sounds correct.
So are they paying, again, similar to my prior question, are they replanting elsewhere? What is the plan? I'll voice my concerns later, but just wanted to address this question first.
Sure. So yeah, in any instance where an applicant cannot meet the replacement ratios on site, they are required to pay in lieu fees, which are payable to the city's public works department. And those fees are used toward the planting of trees throughout the city. So not on this particular site.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure that the condition talks to it. My second question is, what are the heights of the surrounding buildings? Do we have a reference of height to the adjoining? This is right along Central Expressway, and I can see barely any setback between Comstock Street and the actual building. Most of the setback is really with the parking lot along, the buildings to the back and to side. So I am concerned about the height being looming large right off of Comstock. What is the surrounding properties or uses height? Do we have a reference?
I believe most of the surrounding buildings are single story in height. In reference to your comment about setbacks, the only setback requirement in the light industrial zoning district is for a front setback. So technically other buildings or this application could build up to the rear side setback lines.
So is Comstock considered rear?
No, Comstock is the front, and I believe it has a 15-foot front setback with landscaping.
Okay, it's 15 feet. Okay. And my last question is the aesthetics of it, and we've talked at length previous eras about data centers looking box-like. I haven't seen any break in monotony. Am I missing something, or is this the new rendition that you have on your presentation versus what was in the packet?
What was in the packet is accurate. This probably isn't the best depiction, but there are breaks here and different planes along these. They're trying to depict that with shadowing. Perhaps the architect has some more detailed renderings that he'll share during his presentation.
All right, I'll wait for the architect to help answer. I yield, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Biagini.
A couple of questions. I just wanted to confirm that I understand this correctly to staff. The only difference in terms of the issues that Adams, Broadwell, Joseph, and Cardosa have from November 20th letter to today are those 2 sets of fees. That's the only difference.
Yes,
or
I believe
complaint,
so.
I should say.
Yes.
I mean, if I could take this, I've gone through their letter that was sent at 12:56 this afternoon, and there is a large amount of overlap between the issues that they had already raised. There are some slight differences. I see that the author of the letter has got her hand raised and will be making a presentation during public presentations. So perhaps you'd like to hear what she has to say, and then if you have questions after hearing her, I'd be happy to.
That would be helpful. I'll wait until that point in time. A comment I have that mirrors what Commissioner Cherukuru said. I'm disappointed. We've talked a lot about aesthetics and architecture, and I think that doesn't go very far in changing the look of a box building. That said, the other question I have, and I'm hoping staff can assist me with this because it might be a little redundant and somewhere that I missed. There seems to be more and more discussions in neighborhoods about noise generated by data centers, and I understand there was some mitigations on that. Could you refresh my memory on how that's going to be dealt with? Noise abatement.
Oh, I can address that. Yes, Commissioner Biagini. There are legal non-conforming uses that are in proximity to the industrial area, and we have had internal discussions about that. So typically there is a noise limit that in the industrial area they're allowed to basically meet but not exceed that noise level at the property line. And as long as they're consistent with that, they're in compliance with the zoning code. But we have been had more exchanges with residents, first of all, and then trying to bring that into the project review process to consider that while it is allowed, we want to try to minimize the noise as much as possible. So we are looking at that and the technology and the placement of generators and other equipment to try to minimize noise to surrounding residential areas.
Appreciate it. So what if it goes over the max though? Then what?
Well, they cannot do that. They would have to adjust equipment or eliminate equipment or make it more efficient so that it wasn't exceeding the limit. We do have our code enforcement that has taken sound sound meters out there and verify when there's a complaint, but also the equipment is analyzed in the MND to verify that the noise generated by the properties are within the levels allowed under the light industrial zoning district.
Gotcha. So if there was an issue, somebody could go to code enforcement. I yield. Those are my questions.
And if I could draw the commission's attention to two of the mitigation measures. One of them would require a 7-foot 6-inch parapet wall be constructed, which would help reduce the noise levels. In addition, the generator testing schedule is restricted so that you don't have all the generators running at once, generating a loud noise at full load. They have to be under 10% load if they're running simultaneously. So the MND specifically addressed how to keep the noise levels under the threshold of significance through the use of these mitigation measures.
Thank you. Yield back.
All right, so I had to navigate back to unmute myself. Are there other commissioner questions before we open it to public comment? All right, I see none. So let's go ahead and open it. I see 3 hands at this point. I believe Kendra was the first, and then we'll see Suds and Tedma.
Is the applicant present, Mr. Chair?
I thought Kendra was part of the applicant group.
No, that's Adams Broadwell.
Ah, okay. So Tedma?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you,
Ted Mall.
Tedma. Ted Mall.
Sorry, it's a Ted Mall, M-A-H-L.
Okay, Ted Mall would logically be first then.
Okay, thank you. I don't have a major presentation for this, but I just want to answer a couple of questions. Hopefully this will help. One is that's probably the least flattering picture that we have in our repertoire of pictures of this project. So I think we've got some much better shots of it, especially with landscaping and shadows and things like that. So I'm very proud of the project, and unfortunately, I don't think we put our best foot forward with that particular shot. The other thing I wanted to mention.
You can go ahead and share your screen if you have those renderings available.
I wasn't prepared to present. I didn't realize that was part of the role, so I apologize for that. So I'll just try to do things verbally, and I'll do the best I can. One other thing was around the site, there's actually a 3-story data center behind us that's at 1100 Space Park Drive. And last thing I wanted to mention is that our generators are all inside in this project. So as opposed to most data center projects that have, especially in Santa Clara these days, they have data centers, the generators are outdoors. Our generators are all indoors. So we don't anticipate any issues with that, but we know what we need to do in case there's any kind of mitigation, which I've done in the past in Santa Clara. I've done quite a bit of work there, Vantage, things like that. So hopefully that answers some of the questions. But I'd be glad to answer any others.
Ted, excuse me, this is Gloria. Are you able, if we were to move on to the appellant's presentation, would you have time to get some of the elevations and share those afterwards so the commission can see the? Okay.
Yeah, give me a few minutes and I'll
okay. Sure. Whenever you're concluding, yeah, just right now with the commission, then you'll have time. You can. I think it'd be a good idea to share that information with the commission.
Okay, thank you. I'll do that.
Okay, so we can go ahead and hear the appellant, Kendra.
So I think Elizabeth's putting the time up for the next speaker, the appellant. We'll be with you shortly.
Oh, am I unmuted? All right. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, we can hear you. Just 1 sec. We're just going to start the clock for you. Okay. Anytime you're ready.
How much time do I have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, good evening. My name is Kendra Hartman. I'm here on behalf of Santa Clara Citizens for Sensible Industry. And Commissioner Biagini, I just wanted to address your question first, that the comments we did submit today, there are fairly significant changes. There is some overlap, but we did add a fair amount of things in there that weren't in the original comments or the appeal, such as impacts on energy. There's a more robust discussion of the threshold for greenhouse gas emissions. There's some of the new-ish CARB recommendations that ask data centers to consider the backup generator emissions, emergency emissions, as well as their cumulative impacts, just because of the proliferation of so many of these similar projects. So we filed comments today, as I mentioned, along with the assistance of James Clark, who's our expert in toxicology and exposure modeling and environmental health. And his comments also have some additional things in there that weren't in his original comments either. Mostly we are still, sticking with the argument that the MND does fail to comply with CEQA because it's not accurately disclosing and mitigating the project's energy, greenhouse gas, and public health impacts. And we also, as we mentioned, the one big new thing is that, we maintain that the city improperly charged our clients more than $10,000 to file this appeal instead of the $469 filing fee that's allocated for Santa Clara residents. And our members do include Santa Clara residents, one of whom agreed to be named. So we put his name in our follow-up letter today. So going back to the CEQA issues, just to kind of reiterate, the MND, because it's an MND, there's a fair argument standard, which creates a low threshold for requiring an EIR, and there's no deference to the city's conclusions. So if there's any substantial evidence before the city, there's no discretion on whether to prepare an EIR that has to be prepared under CEQA. If there's any, may be any significant environmental or public health impacts. So the city must also include adequate information to fully inform the public about these impacts, also a requirement under CEQA. And we maintain that there's at least 3 reasons why the city should set aside this MND and prepare a draft EIR because of these shortcomings that we feel are there. So first, the city failed to accurately disclose the project's greenhouse gas emissions. I know that we've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit, and yes, the city definitely has discretion to choose a qualitative threshold as opposed to a quantitative threshold. But there's also the requirement that the agency consider the extent to which the project complies with these regulations and requirements that have been adopted to implement statewide, regional, and local plans for the reduction of GHG emissions. And there has to be a rigorous discussion and analysis of how there is compliance with all of these plans and goals. And we feel that the MND continues to rely on these ambiguous thresholds, which claim that the project will not have significant GHG impacts because the project would receive electricity from Silicon Valley Power, which would include energy efficiency. The MND also includes energy efficiency measures, and because it would be consistent with other GHG plans and policies. However, these 3 points do not support the conclusions of the MND, we feel, because Silicon Valley Power, which is listed in the MND itself, it still gets 16 to 25% of its energy from fossil fuel facilities, and fossil fuel resources won't be phased out of the grid until at least 2045. So the project will result in some GHG emissions during its entire life. So we feel that's a significant GHG impact that the MND fails to disclose. Second, the MND fails to disclose the project's significant energy impacts. So the calculations are right there in the MND. The project says that it will result in energy use at the site that is 450 times what is consumed at the site currently. And the MND claims that it can mitigate all of that with these energy efficiency measures, but California courts have held that compliance with energy efficiency measures is not adequate to reduce energy impacts to less than significant levels alone. So this needs to be addressed and mitigated in an EIR. And third, we feel that the city failed to fully analyze the project's air quality impacts from backup generator emissions, emergency emissions, and their cumulative impacts. Commissioner Casey, you mentioned this earlier, these generators do have the potential to contribute significantly to emissions and negatively impact air quality. And the California Air Resources Board, somewhat recently, a few months ago, came out with some recommendations that data centers must consider emergency backup generator use as a standard component of their air quality analysis, because that's what data centers, that's what their purpose is, that's what they're marketing themselves as, to provide uninterrupted power during a power outage. So they should be analyzed if this is their actual purpose for being. CARB also concluded that the proliferation of these data center projects in the state is likely to result in significant cumulative impacts when considered together. So we feel that the MND did not analyze any cumulative air quality impacts, so that needs to be reanalyzed and recirculated in an EIR. And then finally, just to reiterate the appeal that was filed with the filing fee of over $10,000, that's apparently assessed on everybody who is a non-resident, which was, for one, a mistake because we have residents as members of Santa Clara citizens. And also, it's prohibitively expensive for individual citizens. So anybody who lives outside of the city limits, I'm guessing it says non-residents. So it could be somebody who lives just over the city line and may be much closer to a project than, say, somebody who is in city limits, but somewhere further away. And they would still, I suppose, have to pay more than $10,000 if they wanted to appeal a project. So it's a violation of due process. But that will conclude what I have to say this evening. So we urge the Planning Commission to grant the appeal and direct staff to prepare an EIR for this project. And we also ask that the city refund our clients the $9,734.26 that we feel was in excess of the appeal fees we paid. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know I'm probably going to hear from Xander and others, but Suds Jane is waiting patiently, so I'd like to have him have an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess I have no opinion on the appeal, but I know Ted Ma had talked about the noise from the generators, and being that the generators are placed inside the building, that the noise should not be a problem. What I want to comment on is that there are some data centers on Lafayette that people are complaining over a mile away from the noise from these data centers. And this is not during power outages when the generators are on. This is from the cooling fans that are on the roof of the building. So somehow there's a hum being generated from these cooling fans. I believe the city is still investigating that, but I'd like for the data center, Mr. Ma, to address noise issues, potential noise issues from those cooling fans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Suds. Do you want to start with that response, please?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ted. Okay. Yeah, there's similar standards. I don't know when those buildings were built, so I'm not familiar with which ones they're talking about. But when this was approved, there's also noise standards for our rooftop equipment, similar to what the generators are. And there's a maximum noise that we can have at the property line. And it's even more strict. We don't happen to have residents around us, but it's more stringent with residential areas. But we have an equal standard that goes with similar to the generators for any rooftop equipment. Rebecca, you might be able to elaborate somewhat on that, but it wasn't like our generators had a standard, but the rooftop doesn't. These days in Santa Clara, there's an equally applying standard for rooftop equipment.
Okay.
Gloria, am I representing that okay, or Rebecca?
Yes, that's correct. The standard noise ordinance would apply to the rooftop equipment. That's applicable to all industrial properties.
All right, I'll let Commissioner Kezi speak.
Thank you, Chair. So is the fee within the scope of our review?
That would not be, because the fees are adopted by council.
Right. Thank you. And is it new, by the way, the fees that?
No,
10,000?
it's been in the several thousands for several years now, and that just means a non-resident. So if somebody, it's just for residential. If there's a single family residential, I believe, Rebecca, do you recall?
Yeah, single family residential.
Yeah, that's the only one that has the hundreds of appeal. Anything of a commercial nature has that higher for if it's if it's anybody but the applicant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Casey. um, do we have any comments from Xander or others?
Well, I guess it depends how you want. When you want me to.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious on what your feedback is on the various pieces of this.
Should we, through the chair, should we close public hearing first? I'd like to have discussion.
Yeah, but we'll be returning for questions, I'm sure. All right, I think that's a fair thing, but we have Commissioner Chiriku who has another question.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask of Xander through discussion if we are done with public hearing.
Sorry to be so formal about it, but I wanted your name in the recording.
Oh, well, she could rebut. She has 5-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I think we have to do that first. I've been taught well. So
the applicant, yeah, will still have the rebuttal time. Yeah. So
let's go ahead. Let's proceed with that before we close, right?
Both the applicant and then the appellant each get 5 minutes for rebuttal. I'm not sure Mr. Mall will need 5 minutes, but give both of them the opportunity for 5 minutes of rebuttal.
If Mr. Mall is going to present with his slides, I'd like to see that ahead of. I know we were going to allow for him to present.
I'd like to, since I have some authority on that, I'd like to extend the time for that to include the opportunity to present the slides so that we all have a full amount of information. So if he's ready, I'd like to have Ted go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I do. One thing I wanted to clarify. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. One thing I want to clarify is I think there's two issues here. One is that there's some aesthetic issues that we want to answer some questions about. The other is the EIR issue and the whole issue of our CEQA documents. And I think Mike Lisenby from Powers Associates is much better equipped to speak to those issues than I am. So I'm not sure what order you'd like to take things in. I don't, to be honest, I'm at home now and I didn't have access to all my things, but I have some presentations a little bit better than what was shown, if that would help. But like I said, I can't answer the other parts as well as Michael Lisby could.
Is Michael available?
Yes, he's on the phone.
Okay, good. Just didn't see the name. Well, let's go ahead and address the EIR issues and legal issues ahead of the aesthetics. So I'd like to let Michael have an opportunity as part of the rebuttal. If I'm following.
Technically, he's part of the city staff, actually, so he's not subject to any
yes, true.
questions. So it's not actually part of the rebuttal.
Be accurate. All right.
You can take that input now if you'd like.
Yeah, I think it still would be good to have it at this point for sequencing.
So is Michael?
Show it is still muted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do too.
And Commissioner Salam and Chair Salam and Commissioner Casey have their hands up. Is that?
Yeah, I think that was old, but we'll come back.
Okay. All right.
I have my hand up because I have a comment near the end. I'll save it. I'll put it down for now. Okay, make it life easier.
Michael, if you are calling by phone, you just have to press *6 to unmute.
Kieran, are we certain that's Michael? Ted,
I only see as a phone number.
Gloria said he was calling.
Oh. Ted, are you sure Michael's on the line?
He said he'd be at the meeting.
Yeah, he normally is.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's still muted, that number, the 650 number.
The 650 number, could you identify yourself?
We could move on and have.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's
Xander.
safer to move on and let the technicals issues catch up.
Yep.
So we'll go back to Ted and see his presentation of slides, and then we'll go forward again to the EIR issues.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully it'll go through. Let's see here. Okay, can you all see my screen? It says proposed building in the middle. Okay, this is just a landscape plan. It's so you can see the building is here in the middle. So there's more tree. What was probably most disheartening in the other one is there's no landscape. There's no trees. It's kind of floating in air. So I want to just mention that we spent a lot of time with staff on working on the front of the project. On both sides of this building, on the right-hand side, there's a one-story commercial building that's right up at the property line. It's 1970s era. On the left is another one-story data center. Behind us is 1100 Space Park. So what's really going to be apparent from the community is this area here. So we've got, and we had the challenge in Santa Clara and with data centers is that there's a lot of underground equipment. So I'm really proud of how the team was able to get some trees in here, some nice planting, and have actually some sort of interesting ramps that go up to our building that kind of give a sense of relief and a sense of separation from the public part, the private part. In terms of the front of the elevations, oh, that's the old picture. This is the building one context. This one is slightly out of date in terms of some of the fins here, but the rest of it is completely up to date, and it gives you a little bit more of a sense of what the ground plan looks like. And let me go back, show further the elevations. Sorry, just taking me a second here. Here we are. So this drawing does not have trees in it because we were trying to show the building and not, use a trick of the thing with trees to cover it up. But it just gives you a sense of how varied the elevation is. That we're going to have different we've got about 4 or 5 different kinds of material here in terms of, this is a cementitious finish, which is white. And then this is a glass that's meant to look like an office building, but it's actually just spandrel glass. But it seems like it gives a sense of being occupied. That the corners, we're kind of putting the most emphasis on so that it has some relief. That this is all glass here and different colors of glass and fins, so that even though it's a building that's fairly simple, it has a lot of stuff going on the facade. This is just a side view here. This is the west. Next to us in this shot is just a one-story commercial building. What you see here is the rear of the building facing 1100 Space Park. So not many people will ever see this, but we've livened it up. We feel like we've livened it up a lot with, we still have different materials. We've got an exposed stair, which we think looks kind of interesting. And at the top, we've got even though we have a mechanical screen, we've set that back and made it a different color. So it just doesn't, the building doesn't look very tall. This is from the east, and we're looking from the digital data center. This is our tower at the front corner, different colors of glass. Front door is here underneath the canopy. Oops. And this is the canopy right here. And the other thing we've done here is we varied at the base, we've created a different color so that there's some human scale here, and that there's a base that relates to the street, and then above it there's regular buildings. So there's a base, middle, and a top. So I'd love to answer questions about it if there are any. I'd be glad to answer those questions if there's anything here that's not clear. But I think we worked a lot with staff on this. In fact, we went back to the well 2 or 3 times to improve it. And I think working with staff, we improved it substantially. And the whole team is very pleased with it, and very happy with it. And I think the neighbors will be too.
Yeah, I think one of the only questions I had, even looking at Google Maps, I can pretty much guess, but how near is the data center to any residential spaces? I don't see it for more than at least 2 blocks, 3 blocks, but is there?
Really far away. I have to do Google Maps, but there's nothing on this block. This block is almost all data centers.
And you're bordered by 101 on one side and
the Central Expressway.
Yeah.
So we've Comstock is like a frontage road for Central.
Yeah, I see it. Well, I don't mean the facilities bordered. I'm looking at the chunk of overall lands.
Yeah.
It's okay. Good. So it's less of a overall concern for noise abatement. I do echo Suds's concern, though. I've been reading along in next door Santa Clara of considerable number of people complaining about a nearby data center, literally keeping them up at night, almost a mile away, which is that's ridiculous. But I'm assuming here we're not having that same issue. Okay, were there questions? I see Commissioner Chiricuro.
Thank you, Chair. Ted, I am disappointed in the aesthetics. Outside of echoing Commissioner Suds, Councilmember Suds, as well as the previous comment on noise. We've talked at length. The data center is right along Central Expressway. It towers at 80 feet, 87 feet with the utilities and penthouse. The rendering that you have, and it does not articulate a better view. Outside of the aesthetics, I'm just going to voice my concern right now that City of Santa Clara has approved more than 40 data centers already. And to echo the overarching noise, which code enforcement can, but there's really no way to keep a pulse on this when you have that many, and a power outage would blur all of these up. So I'll voice my concerns again, both on the environmental front, but to your point, if there is a better aesthetic to this, and I'm glad we do have an appeal, otherwise we would not have seen this. So to whoever brought the appeal, it still gives us daylight on this project. I will just upfront say that I am disappointed in the aesthetics, and I'll leave my comments to Xander later about the cumulative impacts for this data center. So with that, I'll yield, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Biagini, and then we'll hear from Michael, I guess, if he's been found. Was it Michael? No.
I'm just going to reiterate that I remain disappointed is a good word. I might think of a stronger word, but I'll go with disappointed on the aesthetics because it's still a box building. And I'm not sure at this point, and it's a comment, I'm not sure at this point if there is a certain aesthetic that people think is standard for a data center. Therefore, if you put some colored glass in, it then makes the aesthetic better. I don't see it as making the aesthetic better. That comment aside, I remain concerned about noise because I think Councilmember Jane actually said it quite well. Sound travels. We're having a proliferation of data centers in Santa Clara. And it's the cumulative effect. And I'm not satisfied that we have enough belts and suspenders, should we say, around that issue of noise generated by data centers because of the ability for sound to travel. So those are just my comments. I yield back.
Okay, thank you. I will echo a little bit of I'm sort of middle of the road on the aesthetics. I've seen it worse. I've seen better. It is much better than the gray box, but it is extremely blocky, even with the shadow planes and the attempt at breaking up the volumes. But I can't fight that battle too hard on this case because I can't see how they could efficiently organize the building to add more interesting contrast. So we were waiting for, I guess it was Michael, you said?
Correct, Michael Lisenby.
Okay, is he available now?
This is Rena. I don't think we're going to be able to reach him. We've tried. He is our consultant, and there must be a good reason why he is not joining us right now. But kind of maybe we could talk to Xander. We could take a break for a few minutes because this was not part of our plans, and just regroup after a few minutes. Maybe that would be my suggestion.
Okay, well, we have Xander here. Let's talk to Xander. If he's still not here at the end of that conversation, let's take a break because we'll be over 2 hours into, well, more than that. Yeah, it'll be about 2 hours in. So Xander, can you comment on the EIR and other components of this?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. It's just a question of, do you want me to do that after you finish the public hearing?
No, I think we could do it at both because I'm sure there's going to be more conversation after. And closing the public hearing would exclude us, I think, at this point from talking to Michael when he is found, unless I'm incorrect on that too.
That's fine. I just point out that after I speak and you have questions for me, we'll still have the rebuttal of both the applicant and the appellant.
I'll take your advice because you have had much more experience at the legal flow of this. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
That's not where I was going.
Chair, you do have a hand. So.
I was suggesting that I was just pointing out that before you can close public hearing, you have to have the rebuttals.
Yeah, I agree.
I can speak now or I can speak later. If I speak now, then I'm sure that the rebuttals will include response to what I say, but that's fine. Okay, so
I'm actually good with getting rebuttals that include responses to your comments.
Fine.
So
Fine, it's all good.
And then we'll hear from Suds again, and then we'll close this hearing. We'll close the public hearing and go forward. So
all good. All right. So if Mr. Lisenby shows up, he can add on to my comments. We did receive this letter from Adams Broadwell this afternoon, and as I said before, I think it largely overlaps the comments they already made. Ms. Hartman, I think, suggested that there was a lot of new things. Respectfully, I don't think there's that much that's new, but it's a 14-page letter, and the substantive comments start on page 5, and it starts by talking about greenhouse gas emissions. Item A1 is the MND's analysis of greenhouse gas emissions relies upon an unsupported threshold. This is largely the comment they've made before. The city has the discretion to set its own threshold of significance. The city has the discretion to set a qualitative threshold of significance, which is what we've done in this case. Toward the bottom of the page, the third paragraph says that the city cannot rely upon SVP's power mix to ensure that the project will not contribute to GHG emissions, because 25% of the SVP power mix is generated by GHG emitting natural gas. This is what was disclosed in the MND. This is not, shouldn't be a surprise. Page 72 of the MND contains a chart that shows that is exactly what the mix is, 16% natural gas. It is anticipated that this mix of fossil fuels will decrease over time. But for the time being, we acknowledge fully that SVP is not 100% green. However, we also acknowledge that it is significantly greener than the statewide power mix, which is why on page 72, we have a comparison between SVP's power mix, including that 16% natural gas, and the statewide power mix. And it is based on the difference between SVP's power mix and the statewide mix that we're able to conclude that the impact is less than significant. In her comments, Ms. Hartman said, quote, the MND fails to disclose this. In fact, it's baked into the MND. On page 6, she goes on to argue that there's not enough energy efficiency measures. She lists some of the measures that were discussed in the MND and says that there should be more. I think that's a judgment call. I did a search for the term energy efficiency just now in the MND. It comes up 28 times. I'll leave it to your discretion as to whether or not there's enough. I would submit to you that there is. Page 7 goes on to discuss energy and water use efficiency, saying that we failed to adequately quantify. We do, in fact, quantify the energy use in the MND. She lists a number of bullet points of things that illustrate the inadequacy of the ISMND's discussion of the energy impacts. First, she says that we don't actually attach the TDM policy that they're going to use, that we're going to attach it later. As you well know, as planning commissioners, that's pretty common. We always TDM policy after the project's approved. It has to comply with certain standards, but we don't actually usually have it completed until the project itself is completed. She then goes on to argue that our use of our mitigation measure requiring tier 2 US EPA emissions standards is insufficient because we could require tier 4 when we're talking about how efficient the energies are, the backup generators are. Diesel-fueled engines, we require tier 2. She's saying we could go up to tier 4. Well, she's right. However, we're obligated to require them to bring the emissions below the threshold of significance. The ISMND concludes that tier 2 is necessary to do that, not tier 4. And then the rest of the bullet points on that page go on essentially to argue that there's not enough level of detail. I think, again, that's simply a judgment call. I would submit to you that there's a lot of detail in this lengthy document. Page 9 goes on to argue that the ISMND fails to consider impacts from backup generator emergency operations. This comes up with every data center project. It comes up with every comment letter from Adams Broadwell, quite frankly. They argue that, well, we look at how many hours we test the backup generators. We don't actually consider what about those emergency operations. Well, CEQA, under the case law, we don't look at emergency conditions. It's simply not what the law is. You look at expected operations, but not emergency conditions, and emergency conditions include power outages. Now, Ms. Hartman said, and I admit this is the first I've heard of this, she said that BACMD just recently started suggesting that we should look at emergency operations. That's interesting. I will definitely look into that. But if that's true, if BACMD has just now started suggesting we look at emergency generators, we can consider including that in future environmental documents. We would never change a threshold of significance after circulation. If there's a change in the threshold, we would do it on the next document. And again, it's the city's discretion to set the threshold. Certainly it's not Ms. Hartman's. She goes on to argue that there would be operational energy impacts that the ISMND fails to disclose and mitigate. There's an energy chapter, it's chapter 4.6. And I think she's confusing the appropriate threshold of significance. The threshold of significance for energy impacts is whether there's a wasteful, inefficient, or unnecessary consumption of energy. It's not whether there's going to be a lot of energy. This is a data center. There's no question there's going to be a lot of a lot of energy use. And we do quantify it. It's 89,000 megawatt hours of electricity. But she argues nonetheless that our analysis is insufficient because of this case called Ukiah Citizens for Safety First versus City of Ukiah. And in that case, a court rejected a city's energy analysis in its EIR. Basically, that case was about a Costco. A city put in a Costco, and there were lots and lots of vehicle trips associated with the Costco. No surprise, they get, umpteen deliveries a day. And the court said that they needed to consider the energy impacts of all of those vehicle trips. Okay, this is a data center. We've got, a handful of employees. There's going to be a handful of vehicle trips. There's no way that adding those vehicle trips to the energy analysis would have any impact on the significance conclusion. The rest of the comments are similar. She argues that we didn't do enough on the cumulative analysis. We do have a chapter on cumulative impacts. And then finally, there's the due process issue of whether or not our fee is too high. This is not the venue to challenge our fee. I would also submit to you that more than any other law firm, we spend more city resources responding to public records requests from Adams Broadwell than anyone else. We should talk about how many city hours are used in that endeavor. Anyway, so I think I've hit all of her major points in her letter. I'm sure there's still a few questions out there, but I'd be happy to try and answer them. And or if Mike Lisenby is now on the phone, he can fill in anything I missed.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm getting quite an interesting picture of the situation from just those comments. Does Commissioner Chirikuru have more to say?
Yes, I do, Chair. So question to Xander. Xander, I know you alluded to the comments. I wanted to get a better clarification on how the city quantifies cumulative impacts. I know you said it was in the report, but could you describe a little more about what our thresholds are for cumulative and how far back do we go for approvals of projects?
Well, yeah, there's a couple different ways of doing it. One is we consider all projects that are in the pipeline in the foreseeable future. It's a list of projects approach, and that's the typical analysis. For some impacts, the cumulative analysis is basically built in because impacts like greenhouse gases, it's an inherently cumulative analysis. Not one project could, globally affect greenhouse gas emissions. So for those, the analysis is incorporated. But it's I'd have to check what the specific year threshold was for the cumulative in this analysis. And maybe Powers is here, they can help me out. But there's a standard approach that we use. We have, a list of all the projects that are in the pipeline, and then we analyze the effect of what if those projects go forward, what would the impact be cumulatively?
And maybe David J. Powers can help answer this. So I'm literally going off of not press, but an article about the volley of data centers the city of Santa Clara has in its pipeline, not just the 40 already approved. We've literally become the second data center alley for the entire region. Only reason being because of our Silicon Valley power. And that is really concerning to me. I've said this in every data center application. We are just becoming this monstrous hub of data centers, primarily drawing from our electric grid, which will have a capacity. We heard from Public Works, the capacity is nearing thresholds. We do have extensive water being used for all of the cooling associated with these data centers. I know some of them have more of a technology, that does not necessarily require water. But I did want to say it is a boiling concern for me that we have right now in the pipeline, and I'm going to just quote from the article I'm reading, and I can share if you wanted it to go a little more on record. But they say the ongoing interest in Silicon Valley is demonstrated in the recent news. The data center developer Edge Connex has bought several properties in Santa Clara for future data center use. As of 2019, Silicon Valley Data Center was home to 2.9 million square feet of commissioned data center. And I'm probably, parsing away a little between San Jose and Santa Clara, but the majority, in fact, 40 of them that currently exist for the region is here. And I have not been fully endorsed on why because of our power grid, have become this huge Amazon, Microsoft, Google backyard. So I'm going to continue to voice my dissent on this magnitude. I've asked staff in the past, where is our threshold? What has been our cumulative analysis of when do we reach the pike to say our electric grid? I know it's connection with Silicon Valley Power, but we're talking here energy, we're talking water, we're talking noise, we're talking gas, from all of the generator. And power outage is more of a reality right now than it was in the past ever. So a en masse outage, while I appreciate, and I probably have cloud storage of everything, while I appreciate that, I'm just not appreciative of City of Santa Clara being the backyard for these massive data centers. So I'll yield with my dissent on this.
Well,
Thank you, Chair.
I would just suggest to you my job here is to present to you a defensible environmental document. And in my legal opinion, this is a defensible environmental document. It sounds like the issues you're raising are valid policy issues. We do allow these data centers by right in this zone. That sounds like a policy issue, though, to take up as to whether or not you want to continue to allow them in the number that you are doing right now. It sounds like a policy concern rather than a concern with the environmental document per se.
Okay, thank you. I shared some of Commissioner Chirku's concerns, but I actually did some digging too. It found out that even though it uses a considerable amount of water, because it's recycled and reused, and is a fraction of what a similar amount of water usage would be for a housing complex of that same acreage, I had to dismiss that part. The power use is undeniable. That thing it would glow from space if, it's huge power use. But at the same time, how can you deny that we have some of the best power prices in the country? It's a tough call, but I guess policy is in the hands of the council and less in the hands of the commission. Have we got our other speaker yet?
He is here.
Yes,
Okay,
he's here.
but
And
now, before we start with
since,
him, I'd like to actually hear Suds, who's been very patient, and let him have a moment, and then we'll hear from Michael.
Okay, and just Commissioner Slam, a reminder that members of the public can only have one comment.
Oh, that's true.
Remember?
Okay, thank you, Sud. Sorry.
It's at the chair's discretion. The only
I understand. I'll invite public
if you allow it
later.
You have to allow everyone to speak twice.
I understand. I don't want to get this. I don't want this to spiral at this point. So let's hear from our other speaker.
And just for Mr. Licenby's benefit, I went through all of the comments in the letter that was submitted this afternoon. I struggled a little answering Commissioner Chirku's question about explaining the scope of the cumulative analysis. So maybe you could focus on how the cumulative analysis was done, what sort of, maybe Commissioner Chirku can restate it better than I can.
Okay.
Really? Is it Michael? I apologize if I missed the name.
Yes,
I was questioning the threshold used for this specific project for cumulative impacts. What were the actual metrics guiding your cumulative analysis?
So first of all, yes, my name is Mike Lisenby. I'm with David J. Powers and Associates. I want to apologize for being late. I was attending a family matter. So when it comes to cumulative impacts, it would depend on the impact you are referring to. So is there a specific impact area that you would like to discuss the cumulative impacts of?
So cumulative impacts, you can parse through n number of. Right now, we do have an appeal. We are discussing the cumulative impacts of at least 3 areas that I picked up. There could be more. What I heard from the Peel was greenhouse gas emissions, energy, and public health. And I'm going to throw in noise along with that. Could you address the 4 areas, please?
So I'll go for, yeah, so greenhouse gas emissions, that impact is cumulative by its very nature. When you're talking about greenhouse gases, we're talking about a global impact. The thresholds or the analysis used for greenhouse gas emissions for data centers in Santa Clara, it analyzes the project's consistency with local and state regulations intended to meet the state goals for greenhouse gas reductions as in AB 32 and SB 32. So in that sense, greenhouse gas emissions, the analysis of any greenhouse gas emissions is a cumulative analysis because the thresholds are cumulative. And if you, sure, go ahead.
So what you're saying is overall, and if I understood my greenhouse gas knowledge of it, we are basically saying it's a state, or is it BACMED set regional threshold that you're adhering to? What was your, is there a number? Or what is it that you're weighing against?
The way greenhouse gas emissions is currently analyzed in Santa Clara, there is not a numeric threshold that is used. There were previously numeric thresholds utilized by the Air District, but those are now out of date. They only were up until 2020 because those thresholds were designed to set a level at which individual projects would be consistent with the state's 2020 goals for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. As soon as 2020 went by, BACMED has not released new thresholds for 2030. So at this point, there are no numeric thresholds to use from BACMED. The city uses a number of different ways of analyzing the individual project's consistency with the state's reduction thresholds, which were the intent of the BACMED thresholds in the first place. BACMED just hasn't released an updated one for the 2030 reduction target, which is different than the 2020 reduction target for the state.
So what if not numeric, what were your actual criteria?
It's consistency with local and state regulations intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, consistent with the state's targets.
Which is what for Santa Clara City? You can see I'm going around in circles. I'm trying to get to an actual metric or an actual definition of what was the criteria used for cumulative impacts for greenhouse gas emissions.
Right. If you're looking for a specific number for an individual project, it is not compared to a specific number. It's not a numeric threshold for an individual project.
What's the definition then? What are the actual verbal? Okay, what is City of Santa Clara's guidance? You're punting it to state where the local and you're saying it has to adhere to the local jurisdictions guidelines to meet state, but what is that?
So the City of Santa Clara has a greenhouse gas reduction strategy. It is also, it used to be able to be used for CEQA clearance, but it had the same issue of not being valid past 2020. However, it's still in effect. So the policies and regulations in the greenhouse gas reduction strategy are still mandatory for projects. You can't use that alone to say your project has a less than significant impact, but a project still has to comply with it. And the effect of those, regulations and measures required in that strategy do reduce the project's greenhouse gas emissions. You can't say that that alone is enough. So then you compare it to, is this project interfering with the state's ability to meet its targets? And if you refer to the initial study, there's analysis discussing Silicon Valley Power's power mix and how they're on track to meet the state's targets. And it's a bit complicated, but the state has allocated a certain amount of emissions to the electricity sector, and electricity providers have to meet those targets to be in line with state regulations. And Silicon Valley
You're basically saying that the city will continue to look to the state for guidance on whatever the thresholds are and will adhere to it in the future. But it didn't answer my question when you're saying cumulative impact. And Xander alluded to the pipeline, and I talked to both pipeline, but also prior projects. We approved, I think at least last year, we approved 5, if not more, data centers. What has been your cumulative analysis of all those data centers?
So in the area of greenhouse gases, you don't need to add up individual data centers with each other. anybody's greenhouse gas emissions are a cumulative impact. So by analyzing a project's greenhouse gas emissions impact, you're by its very nature analyzing its cumulative impact to climate change.
Okay, it went over. What about noise, and what about energy use?
So for noise, the project analyzed noise generated by the project and on adjacent property lines, and determined that the project would be consistent with city regulations in terms of noise limits at property lines. The nature of noise from a data center is that it's not going to go that far and be significant. It reduces rather rapidly from the property line. And if it's consistent and meets the noise level at a property line, which it's just adjacent to other industrial properties, then it's not going to reach the nearest residential property line at any measurable level. It doesn't mean it's not audible. It just means that it's not going to be a significant amount of noise as it's measured for the city code.
Okay, not for a significant adverse. And what about energy use? And you still didn't answer, because cumulative to me would have taken a little more of the actual number of projects. If it's only defined by the property lines itself, then it's actually project specific. It's not cumulative. That's my interpretation, but that's just a layperson. Let's leave it at that. What about for energy?
Energy is very similar to greenhouse gases, in that when we are analyzing energy, we're analyzing the project's use of energy in the context of available supply and whether the project is using energy in an inefficient manner. And the determination was that the project's not using energy in an inefficient manner, and it wouldn't significantly impact the supplies of energy available to the city or other projects in the city or the general region.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I'll yield, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing other hands in the commissioners group. I think it's time for rebuttals, and then we can close the public portion.
Starting with the applicant.
Yes. Ted.
Okay. As I said, well, sorry for the noise here. As I said, I can really most clearly address the architectural issues. And, one of the things that the routes that we designed this is, we're kind of in a special situation that our real frontage is on the expressway. And so we've got a building that's kind of scaled to that. There's not much pedestrian traffic here in this area. So I feel like the building really will look very good in terms of when you see it from your car on the freeway. We did try to give it a nice pedestrian scale, as we spoke earlier, but we've in working with staff, I feel like I think we've been successful both from the pedestrian scale, but also importantly, kind of from the urban scale, because like I said, really, this is mostly seen from a distance. The other areas, I think I'd have to leave to Mike, but those are my architectural things I wanted to address.
Okay. Did anybody have a response to that rebuttal before we move to the other rebuttal? No. All right. Can we move to the other rebuttal then, please?
Chair, I do have a request for the applicant.
Oh, I see your hand up now. Got it hidden under the host. Can you pause the timer a second and go ahead and ask your question?
I'll make this quick. Ted, are you open to revising the aesthetics?
I think let me, yeah. I'd have to talk to the ownership, to be honest. I mean, because I'm just the architect and I work for a client, and I've tried to work both with my client and with the city. So I can't answer for that. We're always willing to work with stakeholders as architects, but I'd have to ask my client what their feeling is. And right now, I'm not sure any of my clients are on the line who could speak to that. So I don't mean to give you a kind of a non-answer, but from my point of view, we always want to work with the stakeholders, but I can't speak for my ownership because they've, invested a fair amount of effort in getting as far as we are now. And to go back, I think there'd be a real challenge for them.
You'd think they'd be here if they invested so much.
Is anyone, to be honest, I can't. If not, I can.
Yeah, I don't see others from under the list.
Okay. Sorry, so I can't speak quite much for them, but I hope that answers your question as much as I can answer it.
Ted, who else would it be other than Nicholas?
Nicholas has really been the public face for it. It'd really be Nicholas.
Oh, someone named Chris is raising their hand.
Chris is also part of the group. I'm not sure how much he wants. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. So Nicholas is in Switzerland dealing with COVID parents, and I'm also one of the owners, and I'm based in Dallas. So, look, I think that from my perspective, we would have been more than happy to continue to, go through and revise basically the skin of the building. We've reached a point where we have a contractor, we've got a contract, we have a tenant, we have a timeline. And I think that going back and starting over, reskinning the building could cost us, a significant amount of setbacks, not only from a cost, but from a tenant perspective. So I think, after going through several iterations, we tried to adhere to all the requests from the city. And I think we did that on this latest round of design. So we would very much like not to have to go back and revisit reskinning the building again. I'm not saying that that's impossible, but it would be extremely costly and detrimental to the project.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments or rebuttal for the 2 minutes that are remaining? If not, then we can yield that time and move on to the other rebuttal from Kendra, I assume.
All right. I'm back. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Let's
All
see.
right, great.
Elizabeth, can you, that's 5, yes, okay, thank you, 5 minutes, all right.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm sorry? Are you okay?
Please
All right.
proceed, yes.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I wanted to acknowledge some of your concerns about noise, and I think that is a really important issue to analyze, also in a cumulative effects analysis, which, along with what CARB is recommending now, that we do this emergency cumulative analysis. I think that would really go hand in hand, especially considering that there's all these residents who are complaining about the noise, and it's an actual felt impact. I think it's a really good point to make. I just wanted to respond a little bit to some of the things that were brought up. Xander, with the greenhouse gas threshold issue, yes, we know you have discretion to set the qualitative threshold. We're not arguing that you don't. We're saying that you're impermissibly, violating CEQA by, concluding that this threshold is complied with without a rigorous analysis and the concrete substantive need. That's fine. We're not telling you don't have that threshold. It's all good. And then in terms of Silicon Valley Power, the power mix being, the argument that this is greener than other things doesn't make it green. So you can't really use that as an argument to say that our greenhouse gas emissions are going to be insignificant just because it's better, because, what are you comparing it to necessarily? In terms of the tier 4 versus tier 2 engines for the backup generators, that was another thing that CARB has recently, I say recently, but it was actually back in October. So, you can find these comments that they made to the CEC. They're out there. They recommend also having a tier 4 for all of the backup generators, because there's, like we said, this huge proliferation of these data centers here, and they should be using the cleanest technology that they can. And it's pretty similar, the tier 4 to the tier 2, but it is cleaner. Again, in terms of the emergency operations, we know that CEQA doesn't require emergency operations impacts analysis, but these are reasonably foreseeable impacts, which CEQA does require. And that's what CARB is arguing. They're saying that you need to do this because this is the whole purpose of the facility. And then just on the fees, I have to claim somewhat personal ignorance because I haven't been around for that long, but my this particular fee schedule was voted on in April and made effective in July of 2020. So I don't think this fee schedule was around before that, but again, I'll claim ignorance on that. Let's see. So in terms of the the noise analysis and the argument that it complies with regulations, city regulations, compliance with regulations, especially including as it affects noise and noise ordinances, is not actually adequate significant threshold because it doesn't foreclose the possibility of significant impacts. So a noise ordinance could say, yeah, we comply with that, but they could still be significant. So I just wanted to point that out and throw that out there, that is something that the courts have looked at and decided in the past. So that may be something that you all want to consider with the noise of all of these data centers that are coming up. So again, thank you.
Okay, well, just in time. Yeah, I think the interest in the noise issue is, yeah, that's there. But I also looked at Google Maps. There's no residential anywhere near this data center or the other surroundings. And this is also an industrial area. So I think that the expectations are different for noise. I'm sure that the architect and the builder will give due diligence to keeping it as quiet as reasonably possible for the situation. Commissioner Chair Kuru, are you also still wanting to speak?
Sorry, Chair. No,
okay.
That was to lower my hand.
Given are there any last questions before we close public hearing? No, I'll entertain a motion to close.
Motion to close. Priya.
Second, Biagini.
The motion is to close public hearing. Commissioner Casey?
Aye.
Chair Salam?
Aye.
Commissioner Biagini?
Aye.
Commissioner Chair Kuru?
Aye.
Commissioner Wong?
Aye, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Are there any other internal conversations before we move on to other motions? I see Commissioner Cherukuru.
I'm wondering why the other commissioners are so quiet, but I just wanted to ask of Xander maybe. So how do we send a message? I know EIR, you're fairly confident that this is defensible, so we can certify. But how do we send a message to City Council on taking a closer look at these data centers? I've asked of this in the past, and of course, I'm hoping that with SUDS there, and we have a little more representation from past projects through Becker as well. How do we take this message? Because I'm not comfortable with the future that's coming forward. I can see it, it's there, it's in the press. But how do we send a message?
It sounds like Suds is a good carrier for that message. He's a
But
first-hand
and just just as a reminder that the zoning code is coming up for review. When you see it, that's certainly something you can comment. But again, we don't know that everybody on the commission agrees with that position. There's also SVP. There's an economic development issue. There's city staff. Everybody's going to weigh in on those types of things. So we want to keep the various stakeholders, part of that discussion. So, but you can certainly make recommendations as towards the zoning code update.
Yeah, that's a really fair comment too. I think this isn't a unilateral position, and it's got to be heard by all of the stakeholders. Commissioner Akizi.
Thank you. I have the same concerns as Commissioner Cherukuru. Listening to today's discussions, I think maybe it's a good time to review what we're doing with data centers. So I've been home mostly for the past year, and then like a few months ago, I was driving Scott, heading towards Central Expressway from El Camino, and I was shocked to see this massive data centers that I didn't know about. It has the strange design, like some strange patterns, and it is, in my personal opinion, a real eyesore. And I can't think of many more of those things coming up. And I think that's a big part of this part of the city where we see a lot of those things popping up. And I think it's time to at least review what the city, what is the best interest for our city in terms of data center construction. Is it really a good is it a net plus for our city? Is it bringing more money to in terms of revenue to the Silicon Valley Power, etc. So I hope since Council Member Jane is attending this meeting, that two planning commissioner here are concerned about the data centers. There you.
Okay, I think we're all concerned from different perspectives. So, yeah, you're not alone in the issue. Commissioner Biagini.
Let me just say I'm frustrated. We have the issue in front of us, and then there's the rest of the story. Frankly, I am not satisfied with this idea, with the comments that were made regarding aesthetics. If you start with the gray box and tell me, maybe I'm going to be a little cold here, and tell me that you put some colored glass in it and change the plane a bit so it throws a few shadows, and look, I've got 3 trees, that is not adequate for me to say, wow, you sure made a gray box pretty. It's still a gray box. It's really not moving the bar forward in terms of aesthetics, which I also understand can be subjective point of view. But to move one step further, I know why folks are coming to Santa Clara. I think we all do, for data centers because of Silicon Valley power. So I get a bit frustrated when I hear things like, I guess we could change the aesthetics, but hey, it's going to cost money. Of course, it's going to cost money. Maybe you should have started a little higher than where you started with to begin. And I'm sure down the road, you're still going to recoup your costs because that's why you're here in Santa Clara. Those frustrations aside on aesthetics, I am also frustrated with this issue of, I'm going to call it noise pollution. Yes, I recognize that it's out in the industrial area and there isn't a neighborhood a few blocks over. But A, there's a cumulative effect. I don't have all the answers for what that looks like. But B, noise carries. And I think there's enough out there now, especially with what we've been hearing from residents about Lafayette Street, that says, is there a neighborhood a mile from that area? Yes. I think it's pretty safe to say there is. And that's a huge concern. But where does it come to tonight with what we have in front of us right now? I guess I look for some of my, there's also issues of energy, but those are my two big ones, are the noise and the aesthetics. I don't know how to resolve that considering the issue in front of us. And I look for help from some of my fellow commissioners because I'm just not sure how to move at this point. I hope I made myself clear. So I'll yield back.
Okay. Are there other speakers? Okay, well, I'll chime in a little bit. This is a little off the cuff. I sympathize with every comment that's been made. It's a B minus aesthetically. Okay, it's not an F, but we've seen some Fs. We've seen the gray boxes that somebody threw up and said, hey, this is a data center. This is a B minus, it's not an A plus. But at the same time, I'm looking at it in the context of where it is and what it's being used for and how it will integrate with the other development in that area. And I think it's increasing the aesthetic of the area, just not making a statement of a goal for others to achieve. It's more just like, we're just the average guy on the block. The thing that we really can be careful on is trying to crucify this project on the fact that it is going to be the poster child of all the other issues we're dealing with. They've done a decent job. I'm in favor of proceeding. I'm not happy about proceeding, but I'm a favor of proceeding on this project and letting it get through by denying the appeal. But I really want to invite other comments before we get to an actual vote. I see Commissioner Wong. Please go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. Yeah, I heard a lot tonight. Lance worked with Cisco, me too, almost 20 years. I designed the switch in the data center. I know the noise. In the lab, it's really, really loud. But actually, when we close the door, when I went back to my cube, the noise is almost gone. So I think for the noise, I think should be some measure to deal with it. I think especially, I think the city staff mentioned at the property boundary, they have the standard, right? You cannot exceed some noise level. I think that should be fine to deal with the noise issue. If the data center cannot meet the noise spec, then they cannot run. So for noise, I don't worry too much. Another thing is for the environmental, the green gas issue. To be honest, I'm new in this area. I'm still learning. Probably this is the beginning. I don't know, since this is my first meeting, I didn't know what happened before. Personally, I think the technology is improving, right? It's such as Tesla, they have the Powerwall, whatever. I think probably we should looking forward. Maybe in the future, they have some better backup plan or backup method to replace the generators, or they have better generator to reduce the noise, or improve the energy efficient to reduce the green gas emission. So personally, I'm positive for the future. Regarding to the energy consumption, yeah, I think Silicon Valley Power, if they can provide, I don't worry too much. But yeah, since I'm new, I think I still need to learn to understand more. So yeah, that's just my some idea. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to reassure you that being new does not mean that you do not have a voice. Feel free to voice your opinion, because fresh ideas and fresh views are what makes the commission vibrant.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments? I see Commissioner Chair Cooper again. Go ahead.
I was just going to come to draw a conclusion here. So I'm sensing that, we have some semblance of acknowledgement between the current project meeting some of the requirements. However, I think we can still hold a little tight the reins on aesthetics. As Commissioner Biagini mentioned, there are a lot of perks. There are certain assumptions, of course, that the contractor and agreements have made, and that's always the case. You're always going to have but I would like for us to hold the reins a little better and not just yield. So I would suggest, if the commission is open to it, to include an additional condition to work on revised architectural elements and finishes prior to issuance of building permit with city staff. It doesn't have to come back to us, but I would definitely like to raise the bar. I'm not comfortable with a new project today being a B minus, only because we don't have a way to. We do. That's why this forum exists. If it's an appeal and if we have a way to make it better, I would suggest we use it. We are representing the city, and I'm happy to move towards making every possible effort to make it better and best. It is a huge project. It's a commercial project. There's going to be a ton of these coming. There's, like you mentioned, Chair, there's going to be a lot of revenue. So I'm not for penny pinching here, especially because this is right off of Central Expressway, and 80 feet is not easy. It is right off. There's no setback. It's right off of Cobalt. And so I would suggest adding a condition to the application if the commission is open to it. I yield.
I'm unmuting and muting so many times. I'm getting fingers sore. Thank you. I see Commissioner Kezi and Commissioner Biagini again. Please go in that order.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to reject the appeal, I guess, right? That's what we're asked to consider today.
Yes.
Are we allowed to attach any additional conditions at this hearing to the project, or?
It's pretty open to the commission.
It is. Then
mhm.
I'd like to ask Commissioner Chirukuru if she would like to amend my motion.
Well, may I ask a point of clarification? There are two resolutions before you tonight. The first one is on the MND. The second one is on the architectural approval.
Yeah.
So I would suggest to you, if you're going to modify the conditions, that it be part of the architectural motion.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. I withdraw my motion. I'll let somebody else do it then.
It's okay to have a motion
You
on the
had it.
MND.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Then yeah, I make a motion.
To approve the MND. Is that
Right.
what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a
To
second for
to
that?
uphold the, yeah.
Yep, uphold the
Uphold the-
MND.
and reject the appeal.
Appeal.
Yeah.
I second.
Okay. So
Okay, so that motion's on the floor.
is there any comment from Commissioner Biagini before we proceed to the vote?
So we're going with alternative number 1. Mine will come up under alternative number 2. I just want to make it real simple. I'm with Commissioner Chirakuru on.
On the
That's-
aesthetics. Okay, we'll talk about that after this
All right.
vote. Thank you.
So the motion is to approve alternative 1. Commissioner Akazi,
Aye.
Chair Salame,
I believe that's correct to deny the appeal and
correct.
approve him.
Adopt a resolution to
Yeah.
deny the appeal and
MND.
uphold. Yeah. I'm sorry, Chair Salame, you said yes?
No, I'm agreeing with you. Yes, you have it correct.
Commissioner Biagini,
That's an I.
Commissioner
I'm
Chair,
sorry, you were asking me. Awesome. All right.
Commissioner Chair Kuru,
Aye.
Commissioner Wang,
Aye.
thank you.
All right. So the motion passes unanimously, and the MND is upheld. Let's talk about the second half, which is the aesthetics of the data center, architectural approval. Any comments? I see Commissioner Casey.
Oh, actually, I was about to lower my hand, but I do like to reiterate my comment earlier. I think we need to review the if data centers are a plus for our community or not. I think each city has an obligation as set by the state to increase the housing stock. But I don't think the Santa Clara has an obligation to keep approving data centers unless it's a positive, it contributes positively to our community. So I think it's something that we need to look at. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think that's outside of the scope of this particular project, but it's something that we can use this project as a key example to push the
Thank
other
you.
question.
Part of that is aesthetics, but there are other factors. Yes, thank you.
All right. I don't see other hands. Is there a motion on this architectural aesthetics?
I move that we approve the application with an additional condition regarding aesthetics to be revised from the submitted plan prior to building permit and approved by city staff. I think I swapped the actions, but you get it, Elizabeth.
And I'll second.
Yes. Okay, so we're still at alternative number 2 with the enhanced architecture.
Yeah.
To be approved by city staff. Thank you.
And
Can
I'll
I add a friendly amendment to that?
Sure.
I'd like to specify at least a couple checkbox items that will help us meet that requirement. More volumetric distinction and more change of color within the upper floors of the data center to break up the blockiness of the green and white or grayish white, so that we can have a less massive data center. Materials, I think, is something that it could be worked out with city staff. So I'm only asking for more volume distinction within the upper floors. And that sounds very generic, but I trust that the city staff understands what I'm trying to communicate. break up the blockiness of the building more than it is already. And it can be done with facade. It doesn't have to be structure. Okay.
I
Correct.
accept.
Thank you.
I accept, Chair. I think you've got the right intent, and I think city staff grasped it. It is to break the massing with, you could use a number of finishes, a number of fenestrations and elements to break the massing. So thank you, Chair. I accept your amendment.
Thank you.
And as the person who seconded it, I'm good too.
All right. So your hand's still up. Are you wanting to comment or no? No, guess not. Okay, good. So I guess we can move on. Was that sufficiently detailed to be able to pose it as a votable motion?
Yes, that was clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
The motion on the floor is to approve alternative 2 with additional condition regarding improved aesthetics to be approved by city staff with more volumetric distinction and more color in upper floors to have a less massive data center.
Sounds as good as you can make it.
Very
I
good.
took it,
Vague
took it
enough for
verbatim.
Great job,
enough.
Elizabeth. That
I
was
took it
excellent.
verbatim from you,
Oh,
Chair. Commissioner Ikezi,
Aye.
Chair Salane,
yes.
Commissioner Biagini,
Aye.
Commissioner Chair Kuru,
Aye.
Commissioner Wang.
Aye.
Thank you.
I see the motion passed unanimously. Thanks. I think we'll have a better product at the end, a better development. And I honestly don't imagine this will be a substantially greater cost to the developer because the materials are already pretty expensive. I think they can use them in a way to break the volume. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we have a short 5-minute health break?
I believe we can have an 8-minute one. I need more than 5 minutes. I need to get a drink. So
Okay.
can we have a short recess for 8 minutes, please?
All right.
Thank you.
8:40. Thank you.
Okay, let's resume. I believe we have, are we having Sanders' presentation now or at the reports level?
His report is item 3, so his is now.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
So I think we're ready for all the latest and greatest news on housing from Xander. Thank you.
Hey, I will share my screen. Let me see if I can make it work. How is that? You see my PowerPoint?
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, and I'll get started. So tonight I'm continuing what's become an annual tradition of updating you on recent housing legislation. This is going to be a much shorter presentation than usual because it was a slow year for legislation. Just by way of comparison, in 2019, there were about 1,100 bills that passed. In 2020, there were only 430, and relatively few of those concerned housing. Basically, no surprise, COVID-19 resulted in a lot of unplanned shutdowns in Sacramento. They didn't allow legislatures to focus on housing as much as they wanted. It also didn't allow for the regional meetings with interest groups that typically push housing legislation forward. And legislators, their bandwidth was simply taken up by COVID, understandably. There was also simply, they ran out of time. There were a bunch of bills that made it to the floor right at the end. Oops. I think, Gloria, I think you need to be muted maybe. Thanks. There were a bunch of bills at the end of legislative session that just didn't make it in time. There was like a midnight deadline and they got to the floor like a couple days before the deadline and they just ran out of time. So this is going to be a shorter presentation than usual. Some of you are breathing a sigh of relief, but I do still have a number of bills to talk to you about. And so here are the topics for tonight's presentation. I'm going to do a quick update on some of the laws we talked about in the last few years. And then inevitably, some of the bills concern COVID-19. We're going to talk about some changes to the laws on housing elements. We're going to talk a little bit about streamlining, SB 35 streamlining, a change to the law on density bonuses, some laws related to common interest developments like HOAs, minor change to the law on ADUs, and then a few words about future legislation. So just an update on some laws that we talked about in the last couple of years. 4 topics that we touched on a lot. First, ADUs, accessory dwelling units. We've talked about a lot of the changes in the law over the last few years. Last year, I told you how we're now required to allow 2 ADUs on most lots, 1 junior attached ADU and 1 detached ADU. We can't prohibit the construction of ADUs based on lot coverage or lot size, and we're limited in a number of other respects, like we can't require setbacks that are beyond a certain amount. So predictably, with the relaxation in the standards, there have been a lot of applications. In 2019, we had at least 85 that I'm aware of. Fewer in 2020, but that's probably just the nature of COVID. It's not because there's because people are dissuaded from building ADUs. I expect that number to continue to rise in the next year. So no surprise, we're getting a lot of ADU applications, just not so many right now because of COVID. I did want to mention the Housing Accountability Act, the HAA. Last year, I told you how if a project's inconsistent with our zoning ordinance, but is consistent with the general plan, state law requires that we still approve a housing project. A housing project does not require a rezoning if the project is consistent with general plan standards, but the zoning is inconsistent with the general plan. We're inches away from having a public review draft finally of our new zoning ordinance, but for the moment, we still have some inconsistencies. between our zoning ordinance and the general plan. So we have had a few applications that have tried to come in under this. Only one of them that I'm aware of has actually proceeded through the pipeline, and that's a 8 townhome project on Pomeroy Avenue. That project had a residential general plan designation, but a zoning that was partially residential and partially agricultural. So they couldn't build their townhouse under their existing zoning ordinance designation without a rezone. They tried to get rezoned in 2018 and they were actually denied the city council. But under this law that says you can proceed under the general plan designation, they were able to move forward more recently without a rezone. So they've come in for an architectural approval and CEQA review, and they won't have to go to planning commission or city council unless the architectural is appealed. We've had a couple inquiries from other developers. The catch though is there has to be some zoning designation that would apply to a project, even if it's not the current zoning designation. So we had somebody come in that wanted to build an RV park for veterans based on this law, saying, well, it's consistent with the general plan, even though it's not consistent with the zoning. And we said, well, yeah, but there is no zoning designation that would work for that. So far it's sparing application, but people are aware of it and starting to ask about it. Super density bonuses. I told you about these last year. These are affordable housing developments where 100% of the units are affordable. And the reason the density bonus you're entitled to is super is because it's infinite. You can go up to any density you want if your project's 100% affordable. Although the caveat there is you can't go more than 3 stories above the maximum height for the zone. So you can't build 100 stories. But I guess you could build 100 stories into the earth, I guess, if you wanted to put that many units in. Anyway, empty set. No applications for a super density bonus. We've had a few 100% affordable projects come through, but they're all sort of unique circumstance, like the city-owned property at San Tomas and Monroe. There we put out an RFP to find a developer who would build a 65 dwelling unit affordable housing development. So there was no role for a density bonus to come in because that developer was selected to build 65 units. We've also got a project in the Tasman East specific plan area. The maximum density there is 350 dwelling units per acre. So there is a 150 dwelling unit project going in on 1 acre of land. But again, a density bonus would be irrelevant because you're not going to end up over 350 dwelling units per acre.
Is there a minimum square footage per unit?
Well, there are a number of ways that come into play. You can't have a unit that's smaller than 150 square feet. I think just under the building code, you have to allow for an efficiency unit.
Okay.
So I think 150 in most circumstances is the minimum. Whether there are specific zoning limitations in any of our zones, I don't know offhand. Yeah, you can have small units in some circumstances. SB 35 streamlining, just very briefly, it simply hasn't happened here. That's where if you provide a unit that, if you provide a affordable housing development, depending on how affordable it is, you can qualify for ministerial approval, no discretionary review. I'll get into the nuances of SB 35 a little later, but Santa Clara simply hasn't seen this yet. I think there was a 227 unit affordable housing / commercial building in Novato that used this. Los Altos had a 66-foot tall project with 15 housing units in the city's downtown that use this. And of course, the most famous example is Cupertino, where the Sand Hill Valco project is still proceeding under SB 35, 2,400 dwelling units, ministerial approval. But Santa Clara has yet to see it. So let's talk about the new stuff. And again, no surprise, we're going to start with COVID-19. You can't talk about 2020 without starting with COVID-19. My neck is starting to hurt. Let me see if I can lower my desk a little bit so I'm not craning my neck so much to look at you. Okay. There we go. There are just a few laws I wanted to talk about for COVID-19. The main housing issue, of course, is eviction. There's inevitably the problem of how are people going to stay in their housing if they're not earning any income because of COVID-19. And so most of the levels of government have responded to this, both federal, city, and state. Starting with federal government, on September 4th, the CDC issued an order prohibiting residential evictions between September and December. And that was extended to January 31st on December 27th. That was that Consolidated Appropriations Act that former President Trump initially refused to sign, but then on December 27th, he finally signed it. One thing it did was extend the eviction prohibition until January 31st. And on his first day in office, President Biden directed the CDC to extend its order, and they immediately did that until March 31st. The CDC order authorizes states and local governments to enact more stringent regulations, and both our state and our city have done just that. The city enacted two ordinances. One of them was an emergency ordinance in March 2014. And then ordinance number 2015, shortly thereafter, was a regular ordinance. And it simply prohibited residential evictions for non-payment of rent due to COVID-19 financial impacts or other grounds that were not based on tenant fault. And this was in effect until September 30th. Initially, it had a shorter duration, but the city council extended it repeatedly. The only reason they stopped it on September 30th is because the state came up with their own bill, and the state actually preempted local control at that point. And the state law is Assembly Bill 3088. It's a statewide moratorium on residential evictions from August 31st through January 31st, 2021. The caveat is that a tenant needs to pay 25% of the rent in order to stay in their unit. But if they pay that 25%, a landlord cannot evict them. A landlord can eventually recover all unpaid rent in small claims court, but it can't be the basis for an eviction. Landlords who violate this law are subject to financial penalties between $1,000 and $2,500. Of course, January 31st is 4 days from now. And so the legislature and the governor are very aware of this. And so this week, they are anticipated to extend this law as well, with a couple of other new bills that will take immediate effect. It'll extend this prohibition on eviction until June 30th of this year. Interestingly, it actually includes partial payoffs of back rent to landlords. Up until now, there's been all this focus on, well, we need to stop people from being thrown out on the street who are renting, but it hasn't really addressed, well, what are the landlords who are paying mortgages going to do who aren't getting rent anymore? This actually provides funds for landlords to get up to 25% of back rent paid to them from the state. Or if they agree to forgive 20% of the back rent, they can get the other 80% from the state. So expect to see that signed in the next 2 days. Beyond evictions, there were a number of bills related to housing and COVID. AB 1561 extends by 18 months any housing entitlements issued prior to March 4th, 2020 that would expire prior to December 1st, 2021. And a housing entitlement is defined as anything related to housing, any legislative, adjudicative, or administrative approval, permit, or entitlement issued by a state or local agency. So that includes building permits. As you know, building permits have expiration dates. And under our zoning code, PD zoning has an expiration date. If there's a PD zoning and you don't break ground within 2 years, it expires and reverts to its prior zoning. So this law extends automatically by 18 months any such approval. It applies to CUPs as well, although we don't usually have CUP expiration dates except in the case of alcohol permits, so that probably wouldn't apply. But this is just, I think actually yesterday, the developer of the Summerhill project and the Tasmania specific plan reached out to the planning division and asked this very question, whether we'd apply this. They're gonna automatically get an 18-month extension. The second thing that AB 1561 does is it extends the amount of time that Native American tribes have to request consultation on the CEQA review for housing projects. A couple years ago, the legislature enacted AB 52, which requires the city to notify Native American tribes anytime the city is preparing an environmental document and give the tribes a 30-day period to request that the city consult with them on the project's potential impacts on tribal cultural resources. If the tribes indicate that there are tribal cultural resources that would be affected by a project, there's a process to work with the tribe to develop appropriate mitigation measures to avoid or reduce the impact on those tribal cultural resources. So what AB 1561 does is it extends by 30 days to 60 days total the time for Native American tribes to request consultation on housing projects. And that applies to any applications filed between March 4th, 2020 and December 31st, 2021. So let's move on to housing element law. As you know, existing law requires that the general plan contain a housing element. Oh, I skipped too soon. A housing element contains goals and policies to encourage housing production over an 8-year period. And our current housing element runs from 2015 to 2022. So our next 8-year cycle begins in 2 years. And the housing element has to include policies and identify sites to help achieve Regional Housing Needs Assessment, the RHNA, which is assigned by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, and also our local council of governments, ABAG. So this chart here I put on the screen is Santa Clara's RHNA for the current cycle, 2015 to 2022. And you can see it specifies what does it specify? It shows for the different income categories, how many units each of us, how many units the city is required to produce. It's about 4,100 for this cycle. HCD reviews the city's housing element every time we come out with a new one, and then it monitors our progress throughout the 8-year period. So what this bill does is it addresses one of the housing shortage reasons. One of the reasons that housing is too expensive is the type of housing that's built. Almost all the housing built in California is either single family, which can be a really inefficient use of land, or it's mid and high-rise construction, which can be really expensive to build. So one strategy to lower the cost of housing is to facilitate the construction of missing middle housing types that accommodate more units per acre, but are not inherently expensive to build. So that includes medium density typologies like duplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, etc. So this bill, I mean, you can see we already have a minimum density of 30 dwelling units per acre for these low income categories, extremely low, very low, and low. When we identify the sites in our housing element that we have to identify to accommodate these units, we have a minimum density. We don't currently have a minimum density or maximum density for any of these other categories. But under this bill, here's what's changed. It now creates a minimum density of 4 dwelling units per acre for moderate income and 4 dwelling units per acre for above moderate income. There's also a maximum density of 100 dwelling units per acre for moderate income. Now you see there's this qualifier here. It's 25% or more of the units have to be at that range. So it doesn't completely prohibit 1 dwelling unit per acre, 2, 3, but it does require that for at least 25% of the sites we identify in our housing element for moderate and above moderate income housing, that we accommodate 4 dwelling units to 100 dwelling units, or for above moderate 4 dwelling unit minimum with no maximum. So that's something we'll need to address in our next housing element, which we'll probably begin drafting in about a year. Okay, let's jump from housing elements to streamlining because the two are closely related. A few years ago, I told you about a law known as SB 35. It was first enacted in 2017, went into effect 2018. What SB 35 said was that depending on how well the city was achieving its RHNA goals, the city would have a new obligation to ministerially approve certain affordable housing projects. SB 35 streamlining is ministerial approval for infill housing projects that meet general plan and zoning requirements. So again, a second ago, we were talking about housing elements, and HCD has to approve the city's housing element, and then it monitors its progress towards achieving the requisite number of units. So if you've at least adopted a housing element in compliance with state law, and you make annual reports, and you're making a concerted effort to actually achieve your RENA allocation, you'll be considered a compliant jurisdiction by HCD. If you haven't done all those things, you're non-compliant. And SB 35 streamlining means something different depending on which of those categories you fall into. For compliant jurisdictions, you have a 50% affordable requirement. And what that means is if somebody comes in with an affordable housing development where 50% of the units are affordable, you have an obligation to approve it ministerially. If you're a non-compliant jurisdiction, you have an obligation to approve affordable housing developments that are 10% affordable for low or very low income houses, or 20% affordable for moderate income. And again, Santa Clara is a compliant jurisdiction, at least for the moment. All of these orange cities in Santa Clara County are 50% affordability cities. You can see Los Gatos and Saratoga have it much harder. They're 10% cities, and they have to approve ministerially any projects that come in that are 10% affordable. So there was a change this year in SB 35, and that was simply to provide a ministerial path to modify approved development projects prior to the issuance of the final building permit. So a developer can request modifications to an SB 35 project even after it's approved. The city can't reconsider other aspects of the project that are not affected by the modification. And there's a time limit in which the city has to act on the modifications. They have to act within 60 to 90 days. And they have to approve it if the project's modifications are consistent with objective planning standards in place at the time of the original application. So basically, it just gives a developer a second bite at the SB 35 streamlining process. They don't. They can change things down the road and still get that fast ministerial approval. Also, it takes projects on a historical register off of the SB 35 track. You cannot anymore do SB 35 ministerial approval if your project is on a historic register, which makes sense because there needs to be more thorough review if it's a historic property. Also, it specifies now how cities have to construct public improvements in conjunction with SB 35 projects. I think what was happening was some cities who had to deal with SB 35 projects were perhaps dragging their feet in how public improvements were being added onto a project. So we're talking, things like bike lanes, sidewalks, transit stops, driveways, streets, utilities. Basically, we have to treat SB 35 projects like any other project and not use the improvements process to chill or delay. Let's see. Also, local governments are now required to go through a scoping consultation with Native American tribes before processing an SB 35 application to determine if the proposed development could impact a potential tribal cultural resource. You see this in a lot of bills this year. There was this drive to get Native American consultation implemented a few years ago, but then there was this rash of bills that pushed for more fast ministerial housing approvals, and they forgot to consider the Native American implications of that. So now we have a lot of sort of tweaks to pre-existing bills to add the Native American consultation process. So this requires Native American consultation for SB 35 applications, and it would make a proposed project ineligible for streamlining under SB 35 if the Native American tribe does not agree that there would be no potential tribal cultural resource impacts from a proposed development. One other bill in the vein of streamlining, although it doesn't directly apply to SB 35, it still has the goal of speeding up housing development. And that's AB 1851, parking lots of religious institutions. This actually authorizes housing in religious institution parking lots, provided that the total reduction in parking spaces that would result from taking up the parking lot would not reduce the parking by more than 50%. So you have a church, synagogue, mosque, you can convert its parking lot into housing as long as you still have half of the parking spaces once you've done that. And then the resulting housing development, we're allowed to require one parking space per unit for the housing that's next to the religious institution. So yet another sort of unique way the state is coming up with providing housing wherever they can. All right, let's move on to density bonuses. And I should have mentioned outside of this, if you have questions as we go along, you can feel free to jump in, or you can just save it to the end and we'll play our usual game of Stump the Attorney. So density bonuses, you're familiar with them. A density bonus allows a developer to build more units than would ordinarily be allowed under the general plan or zoning ordinance if the developer commits to providing a specified percentage of affordable units. So for example, if a developer commits to providing 10% of the units in the development to low-income households, he's entitled to a 20% density bonus. If the maximum density of a zone was, say, 50 dwelling units per acre, he'd be able to build up to 60 dwelling units with that bonus, 60 dwelling units per acre with a bonus. And those bonus units can be market rate. The density bonus law also qualifies developers for incentives. Incentives are things like a reduction in parking requirements or relaxing setback requirements or changing lot coverage requirements. The number of incentives you get depends on the type of housing and the amount of the affordable units. So here's a table summarizing the law as it existed before recent legislation. And you can see the amount of density bonus you get is always capped at 35%. The maximum bonus somebody can get is 35%. For very low income housing, you can have as many as 5% of the units provided would get you a 20% density bonus and then one incentive. And then there's a sliding scale that gets you to higher percentages. 10% gets you 32.5, and then 15% you've capped at the 35%. For low income, you have to produce more units to get the bonus. So 10% of units to get a 20% bonus with one incentive. And again, you've got this 35% cap. Here at the bottom, we've got this super density bonus that we were talking about earlier, where you have a project that's 100% affordable. If you're near transit, it's infinite. You can have an infinite density, except again, you're capped by the height because you can only go 3 stories above the maximum height of the zone. But if transit's far away, you only get 80%, and you get 4 incentives. Anyway, all AB 2345, this bill does is change some of these numbers. It makes it easier to qualify for a density bonus, and it increases the maximum density bonus that a developer can qualify for. And I've highlighted what the changes are. The biggest one that jumps out, of course, is over here. The maximum bonus has gone from 35% to 50%. And again, there's a sliding scale. And it's so you can see it here. They've also changed the threshold necessary to qualify for density bonus for low income housing. So before, you had to have 20% of the units low income to qualify for 2 incentives. Now it's only 17%, and 30% has been reduced to 24%. So basically, they've just made it easier to qualify for density bonuses and then increase the amounts of the bonuses that a developer can get. This bill also makes minor changes to the reduced parking incentive. Again, a developer will qualify for a certain number of incentives, and one of the main ones they frequently ask for is a reduction in parking. But there's some guidelines as to how much a developer can ask for and how much a city has to provide. So Before the change in the law, the law said that for 2 and 3 bedroom units, we could not require more than 2 spaces. Now, under this, if they ask for a parking reduction, we can't require more than 1.5 spaces for 2 and 3 bedroom units. We can only require 0.5 spaces for projects near transit that are either 20% low income or 11% very low income. And for parking near transit, that's 100% affordable, the super, or if it's a senior project, we can't require any parking. No parking for 100% affordable or senior projects. So I hope there's good public transit. Alrighty. Here's a bill that made some changes to the laws on common interest developments, things like homeowners associations, condo associations. Also made a minor change to the laws on accessory dwelling units, ADUs. So first, for common interest developments, this requires that HOAs and condo associations allow their owners to rent out their units, including all ADUs and junior ADUs. So if you have a provision in your HOA's CC&Rs that says you shall not rent out your unit, that is no longer enforceable. You have to allow people to rent out their units, or some of the units. It's not all of them. It still allows HOAs and condos associations to cap the total number of units at 25%. You can also allow the condo associations and homeowners associations can also still prohibit short-term rentals. So if they want to avoid having, Airbnbs run through their complex, they can prohibit those in their CC&Rs. But you can't prohibit rentals altogether anymore, as long as at least 25% of the units are able to be rented. That's a pretty simple change. The other one is to ADUs. Prior law required cities to ministerially approve or deny a permit for an ADU on lots with an existing single-family dwelling or multifamily dwelling within 60 days of receiving a completed application. And I think Santa Clara's been pretty good in complying with that. But now here's the teeth to the bill. They've now added a requirement that if we don't act within 60 days, the application is simply deemed approved. So it's just more incentive to get our act together on time. And believe it or not, that is pretty much it. I'm just going to give you a few words about some upcoming bills. The future of housing. I think this was this is supposed to be a future housing development. Once upon a time, this was in Barcelona. It was the Gaudi site where he was supposed to build some huge development. And we ended up with these Dr. Seuss-like buildings, but not the actual housing development. What is in the works for the future? Probably a lot more. Again, when Governor Newsom first took office, he said that housing was going to be his primary focus. And both the Assembly and the Senate introduced packages this year, but neither really went forward except for these scattered bills that we've talked about. I already told you about the bills that are advancing this week to prolong the eviction moratorium, but a few other bills that are in the immediate future, because I think they're sort of variations on what didn't quite make it across the finish line in December. First, Senate Bill 6 would allow residential projects on certain commercial lots, including strip malls. It would make housing developments an allowable use in most office and commercial zones, as long as it's not right next to an industrial use. There'd be penalties under the Housing Accountability Act for non-compliance, and SB 35 streamlining would apply if somebody comes in with a residential application to build on a commercial or office lot. So it's called the Neighborhood Homes Act because they call the neighborhood, they call these lots that are commercial or office, but not next to industrial, they call those neighborhood lots. Again, it's just pending, but we'll see if it passes. The second one that's right in the front of the hopper, eliminate all single family zoning. So would require ministerial approval for duplexes in single family zones. Also ministerial approval for the subdivision of parcels into equal parts that are 1,200 square foot or more. 1,200 square feet is not a huge parcel. So you could potentially divide your single family lot into 2 parcels of equal size, as long as each one's at least 1,200 square feet. And then you could put up a duplex on each one. So like that, we're going 1 house to 4 houses, and it's all ministerial. The city can't prohibit it. Again, this is proposed, but I think this is the tenor of things to come. One final one is Senate Bill 10, which is a CEQA exemption for multifamily residences of up to 10 units per parcel, if the parcel is located in a transit-rich area or jobs-rich area or an urban infill site. Most parts of Santa Clara satisfy those requirements. So again, the purpose of taking CEQA out of it is to make it ministerial. So there's no discretion involved. There's no time really involved. The applicant simply comes in and gets approved. The idea is to allow municipalities to quickly take advantage of unused and undeveloped urban lots. But as always, there's the push-pull between the desire to address the housing crisis and the need for local control. That is all my predictions for coming attractions. Like I said, it was a shorter presentation this year, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about any of the bills or anything else housing related.
I'm waiting for hands to go up. Okay, there's Commissioner Chiakuro.
Thank you, Xander. Thank you, Chair. That was very comprehensive of pretty much not much as you started, but that was pretty comprehensive. So in little teeny ways, we are inching. I think Commissioner Ikezi started the meeting with an announcement that Berkeley had done away with parking. And as we see this almost movement happen, you can see that kind of trickling in. So we'll wait to watch how City Council reacts to some of the future parking questions that some of these housing developments are going to bang. They're going to really have the community discuss, especially when it comes to mixed use housing with retail and commercial. So Xander, I don't know if you have any confirmation on how do we treat housing that have mixed uses with it.
For which bill? I'm sorry.
For parking.
Oh. Well, right. So the limitations on parking I was discussing were in the context of density bonuses. So when you qualify for a density bonus, the city is limited from requiring more than a certain amount of parking if they request a reduction in parking as an incentive. And that's the wrong slide. So it's this one. So the density bonus law does apply to mixed use developments. I can't remember the standard right offhand. I think it's something like at least 2/3 of the square footage is residential, something like that. Then the law still applies. So I'll just pull that up really quick to double check that. But I believe these limitations that you see on the screen apply even in the mixed use context.
Got it. Thank you, Chair. I yield.
Okay. So I had a sort of a leading question in the middle of your presentation about micro units. I've been reading up on Japan's new craze around 150 square foot apartments or condos actually that are being sold in the $60,000 range. 100 square feet on the main living space and a 50 square foot loft. Is that like our real future here? I get a little confused if we did that, would that qualify as a very low income?
Well,
yeah.
About the 150 square foot minimum, just under state law, I don't think we can go below that.
Yeah.
If we wanted to. I mean, at a certain point, you have fire safety issues, I'm sure. Are we headed in that direction? I don't know. There's been talk about micro units where you have basically sort of like a dorm situation where it's just like a room that you rent and there's a common kitchen. You're starting to see different housing forms that are creative and tiny. I think 50 square feet is unlikely.
Oh, no, no, not 50. It was 150. It was 100 square feet on the main floor and then a 50 to 60 square foot loft area. So it's kind of a 2-story space, but I Googled it. I looked at some of the floor plans. It's amazing how much you can squeeze into a space that small, but they never show the outside. They never show what it means to get in and out of your 160 or 170 square, 50, 60 square foot apartment. It's like, oh, it must be all hallways and stairs.
And elevator banks. I hope
Yeah.
There's going to be a long line with that many units crammed in.
Yeah, but the price was definitely totally affordable to students and service workers and basically everybody who needed a place to call their own could get one. So, yeah, I hope we don't go that way anytime soon, but I also see that as one way we might be going just to alleviate the density issues. A 5-story building with 150 square foot units, you could pack a lot of people. Where would you park them? I don't know. Where would you park them? You're going to have all public transit commuters. Awesome. Thank you for your presentation. I see Suds has a question. I guess it's okay to open up for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's let him ask his question and.
Questions, I'm sure. It's totally fine. I don't have to be anywhere.
Let's let Suds ask. I don't know if he's still unmutable. There we go.
There we go. Okay. I think it was AB 2345 that you said that they can go 3 stories above the current zoning. How does that affect our 45-degree rule for heights? And how does it affect people's, I guess, privacy and ability to see the sky?
Well, right. So what I was talking about was actually existing law. And it's for this super density bonus. That's this last category down here at the bottom of this slide. When you have a 100% affordable development, as I mentioned at the beginning, there just aren't any of those that have come to Santa Clara yet where they've asked for a density bonus. The implications of having infinite density are that you could build a 1,000-story building if that was physically possible. So the legislature did put in a cap and say, thou shalt not build more than 3 stories above the height of the zone. So you're asking me, well, if we've also got a requirement in our zoning code that has a 45-degree rule for heights, which rule applies? The state law allowing them 3 stories above, or the 45-degree rule? I'd have to look at that for you, but I guess the state law would supersede. I suspect the well, is the 45-degree rule in our design guidelines? Is that where you're citing that? Because I don't remember that rule offhand.
Xander,
yeah,
we're creating that as transition as part of the El Camino Real specific plan. We allude to that as design guidelines, but we're actually going to create objective standards that get to this 45-degree, really sort of adequate separation for kind of lower density next to higher density.
I see.
But it's currently in the general plan.
Okay. Well, the exact text of the state law is, if the project is located within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop, the applicant shall also receive a height increase of up to 3 additional stories or 33 feet. So would that be subject to the 45 degrees? I suspect not, but let me That's one. That's one. Let me dig in a little bit on that and see if I can get you some clarity.
Well, we'll have the Stump the Lawyer award for such later.
He always wins it.
Yeah.
That's why we bring Suds on board.
Yeah.
It's not the only reason.
So, was there anything added around support for EV and commuter bikes and things like that to the housing requirements? Did they change anything about pre-wiring and things like that?
Not to my knowledge, in the state statutes, be a new building code another year.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's part of that process.
Well, Newsom's new no, I don't know if you'd call it no ICE cars by 2035, but it seems to be that goal of selling strictly EV, which will definitely push the building requirements very hard in order to make that deadline. So, okay.
Yeah, I'll double check that for you, but I don't think there were this year, but maybe there's one pending.
Okay. So did you have another question?
Yes, the EV charging will be covered by our REACH code.
Yeah.
And so I don't think the state, they're looking at putting REACH codes into the new CEC Title 24, Part 6, Cal Green, but for 2022, but the city will probably do something earlier than that.
Right.
And I think that the current proposal is 75% of spots will be level 1 EV charging, and the other 25% of spots will be level 2 charging.
Right. And I don't believe it's intended to be a group shared charging environment either. You're supposed to have an outlet at each spot, which seems to be the biggest challenge because I don't think any of the new places are being wired at that level. So, okay. Interesting. Okay. Any other hands, questions, or should we move on to the next step for today? Okay. Thanks very much, Sandra. It's awesome to hear that, and it's good to hear updates on a regular basis because that way we're not caught off guard when a project comes through that meets one of these criteria.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Xander.
Thanks, Xander. Yep, thank you very much.
Yeah. So then the next portion is moving on to reports of commission, board, liaison, and committee. Are there any new announcements that people have? It's probably okay to chime in at this point. Nope.
I have a question. When is the last planning commission spot going to get filled?
Good question.
I don't think we actually have an update to share on that. Elizabeth, I think you were last in communication with the clerk's office. Do you?
Yeah.
Do you
No,
recall?
we've not been given a specific date yet. I expect it to be soon. As soon as I find out, I will definitely send an email to everyone to update you.
So excuse me. Are we going to be? Is the city going to ask one of the candidates who have already interviewed, or are we going to have another?
I think that was an open question, whether or not they would expand it. I think there's a report supposed to go back to council for various options. So.
Oh, so it hasn't been decided. I see.
don't think so, but.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, definitely would like to know. Keep us in the loop. Thank you. Commissioner travel training reports, requests to attend training.
May I speak, Chair?
Sure.
Oh, yes. This is a recommendation that I always make whenever we have a new commissioner. I highly encourage new commissioners to seek trainings, especially on like the general plans and zoning and other planning related trainings by attending like conferences hosted by well, there are a lot of organizations, so it's a really great way to learn how planning is done, because there's a lot to learn. I think I felt that when I started, the learning curve, what you have to learn was a lot. You have to learn a lot. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I've been looking. I haven't found anything that's virtual yet that I could even, suggest to attend. So I'm hoping others might come across something and bring it to the commission.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks. All right. I guess Commissioner Biagini.
Tis. I would highly recommend, I know I bring this up a lot, but I would highly recommend for the new commissioner to attend the League of Cities Planning Commissioner Academy, which last year they said would be the beginning of March this year, but in a recent email, it sounds like they're moving it potentially to the end of March. I'm sure it's going to be virtual. I found that to be extremely helpful. But I'm sure Elizabeth will let us know more about it as the League of Cities decides what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got my eye on it. And as soon as they have a date, I will definitely send it out to everyone.
Thanks, Elizabeth, because that's not a one-time deal. It can also serve as a refresher. Okay, my comments. Thanks.
Awesome. I guess next on the list is Planning Commission budget updates, if there are any.
Yes, just to give you a balance on your current budget with the expenditures to date, including the iPads, your current budget is $12,763 until June 30th of this year.
Okay. So if we have something that we need to purchase, we should really consider it. I didn't think of anything. I've gotten my meeting pieces, but I'm sure others might have other technology they need, or these trips. I'm assuming the trip will count significantly towards that. If it's if it's a travel situation, I don't anticipate travel as being an option, at least through April, May, June, somewhere in there. So hopefully just the sign up fees and things will be in it small enough that we can have more than a couple people go or attend. Okay. Agenda items coming up.
We have a rezoning item for the February Planning Commission that we're aware of. There might be something smaller like a use permit or something that staff hasn't yet scheduled that might also be on the calendar. We had several study sessions at the end of last year, really the fall timeframe of all of our specific plans that are underway. And just wanted to let the planning commissioners know that those study sessions, those projects such as our Patrick Henry specific plan, our El Camino Real specific plan, Freedom Circle focus area, that all of that planning work is continuing to progress. We do include you on notifications when we release EIRs and such, but there's a sort of a bit of time right now where those plans are developing. And as we get closer, which for El Camino Real will be in the spring, when I say spring, I'm more like April timeframe, for really bringing something like that forward to the Planning Commission for its actual approval. We may do a short kind of info session for you all again. With El Camino Real, actually this Planning Commission has received a few updates, but I do know we have new planning commissioners, and it would be good to have this information in front of you before you digest the entire plan. So I just wanted everyone to be aware that, these specific plans are progressing. They're moving forward to environmental clearance, coming back to you for sort of a short information sharing, and then really their approval. The other body of work that we are moving forward, I know it doesn't seem like we are, but there's a lot of behind the scenes work, is our zoning code update. And the Planning Commission gave us a lot of good feedback about how this is a big body of work, and really you're not interested in seeing this come to you in one a night for approval, which we fully appreciate. So myself and John Davidson have put together a schedule so that we can bring some study sessions for the Planning Commission that talk about the various different chapters of the zoning ordinance, the proposed zoning ordinance, and then we do intend for that to be available through multiple sessions as well for you to consider when we actually bring the code forward. We will be letting you know, probably in the next month and a half or so, we intend to release the public document so that members of the public can read the details of the actual draft zoning code. And that way we can get their feedback and also be able to present that to you during those study sessions.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
great.
One of the things I was going to suggest, I know it's not kind of out of order here, but one of the things I was going to suggest is that maybe we could do another of the council and commission virtual dinners, something like that, where we just get together and just talk over some of the current topics. It would be a nice bridge for the new commission. I'm sorry, for the new commissioner, but also for the new council members, just to cross communicate a little bit more directly. Maybe suggested as a future event.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent suggestion, Chair Salim, and I will definitely bring this up to the city clerk's office, who I know schedules those. Well, they used to be dinners, right?
Yeah.
But at least some virtual FaceTime with everyone.
Yeah, just send everybody a gift card to Chipotle. We'll all get our own dinners. I'm just kidding. No, just the ability to have a time that we gather as a group would be really nice. I think being that those could also be recorded might help the public see how we work together. So awesome. Thank you. City council actions.
Yes, Chair Slime, let me bring this up. So there's, on the January 12th meeting, there's a few items. First of all, we have the appointment of our new planning commissioner, Commissioner Wang, and that was part of their action. Then ordinance 2025 amending the transit neighborhood zoning district to allow certain non-residential uses within the first 3 floors of a mixed-use building and to correct an error regarding permissible density ranges was approved. Also, another ordinance adoption of Title 17 of the code, and that's regarding the creation of the Tasman East Specific Plan infrastructure fee. And then there was a DDA that was with core affordable housing on the former Bayrek and the Agri-Hood site that is for the number of units in the open space. And then one other thing, the Coleman Gateway project that's been a great interest to everyone on 1205 Coleman Avenue. The park design was going forward to council for approval, and I believe was on consent. But then there was public input that they wanted to have more discussion regarding the design of the park. And so that was sent for further collaboration with the community. So that process is now taking place. And that's it related to Planning Commission items. Thank you.
Okay, so that really covers both the upcoming agenda items and the city council actions, right?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Okay, so guess where we're at.
Adjournment.
Yeah,
Motion
this,
to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
there we go. Commissioner Biagini for motion and Commissioner Kizzy second.
Very good. I'm going to assume it's a unanimous vote to adjourn.
Yes.
All those in
thank
favor,
you.
yay. Okay.
Yay.
Very good.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks
See you
all.
next month.
Thank you.
Good
Stay
night.
well.
Thank
Stay
you,
well.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.
Yeah, good night.